Hello and welcome to episode 138 of the Kraken Crowbar. It is the 26th of April 2016 and I'm joined today by me, Chris Thurston, and...
That went about as well as me last week. I'm Philip War.
And having not yet, in the last 2 weeks, fucked up the intro to this podcast, it's Tom Senior.
Hello.
Marvellous. Today is apparently Alien Day.
What is that?
As in the Ridley Scott's Alien, or James Cameron's Aliens.
Is this like Back to the Future Day?
It is, yeah. It's because in America, it's 4/26.
So
right?
what?
And the planet in Alien, what has the big toilet seat shaped alien mothership on it, where the little eggs come from that get on John Hurt's face and make him all owie in the tummy, is LV 426. Subsequently returned 270 years later in the events of Aliens.
But you could just start picking numbers out of anywhere and making days about them.
You totally could.
But then how do we assign meaning?
I don't know, Pip. And indeed, that's...
But could you not have just picked another string of numbers out of Alien?
That's for marketing departments to decide, not the likes of us. I think you're fine.
This flew into my radar today, like a lost seabird, because they have Reebok released a line of sneakers based on the shoes that Ridley wears in Ripley's from Metroid.
Ridley's the director.
Ridley Scott.
Yes.
The shoes that Ripley, not Ridley, wore in, this is going so well, in Aliens, the kind of like cool space trainers she wore. They've made them in real life.
But surely they made them in real life when she wore them.
Yes, but they were props. These are for like public sale, right? It's not being
But
difficult.
they could totally have made them as like a production line thing back in the day.
Yes,
and
but
then
they
they
didn't.
could have... Oh. Well...
So they've made these shoes, but the point is, the stupid point that I was going to make, it's nothing to do with video games, but it's just a softball, funny thing to open the podcast.
No, let's pick it apart relentlessly.
Was that these are Ripley's shoes from the movie, and they only released them in men's sizes.
Huh.
So yeah, one of the most iconic female heroes in science fiction.
What are men's sizes?
I don't know. I don't really. That's a good question. Well, I mean, I presumably mean it's like a larger
Because, I think I
size.
cross over, right? Like,
Really? You have tiny feet.
but I've got size 5 feet because they're quite wide. They should secretly be a 4, but they're really wide. Like, I've basically got discs. I've got hooves. I'm like
paws.
a cart horse. But, so size 5 is like, also you can get man shoes in 5s.
I think this
it's
was like
rare,
size
but...
8 to 16 or something.
Well, I couldn't wear them.
Exactly.
But you could get a tall lady who requires long feet for balance. and then she could, wear them. I think it's very, obviously it's not a great, slant to their marketing ploy, but, I don't think you can rule out ladies with larger feet. That seems very exclusionist of you.
They haven't ruled in ladies with normal feet.
But they didn't make them for children either.
It's true. Well, you've nuked this bit from orbit.
I got that. That was a reference.
It was, yeah.
Happy Alien Day, everyone.
Yeah, happy Alien Day. Alienate someone you care about. It's not Alien Day anymore at the time you're listening to this, because that's in the past.
And also we use a different calendar system in the UK.
Yeah. Happy 264.
What would it be on Friday?
294.
Hi, happy one for those. Good.
Happy one for those, indeed.
Yeah, I messed that up.
Yeah, okay. We're all doing well.
Shall we talk about video games?
Yeah, so about video games. So the video game news, the hot video game scoops, hot off the scoop press.
It's an ice cream.
Exactly. Is the name of this year's entry in the Call of Duty franchise.
Have they officially confirmed?
No, it's sort
it?
of leaked.
It was PlayStation Store leakage, wasn't it?
Yeah, leaky PlayStation.
Yeah.
But
You need to get your fridge fixed.
yeah,
If the scoops are leaking.
because it's called
Call of Duty
Infinite Warfare.
Infinite Warfare.
Wow.
And the best thing about
Yeah.
this is it's the new one being made by Infinity Ward.
I feel like it makes my joke slightly less rubbish about, when they were like, can't wait to show you what we've been working on, and they tweeted the acrylic sign that just said Infinity Ward. So maybe like...
We've been making this sign.
Yeah, but we've changed it ever so slightly. Yeah. I didn't think of that. Oh.
So that's... Stupid.
Infinite warfare.
Infinite warfare.
How do you have DLC for something that's functionally infinite?
Good question.
Well, the question is it? I mean, so in the end, it will almost certainly not be infinite. So it's interesting, sort of, to try and figure out what they mean by infinite warfare, if indeed they do, and this is true.
Aren't the rumours that it's set in space? The infinity of
Maybe
space.
if they set it in the infinity of space, but they also have is it like the Deep Space Nine space hub circled space station? And so you could just spend your life running down corridors, but it's just one corridor that loops all the way round, like a Mobius corridor or like a circle.
Mobius corridor or
a ring.
Well, it depends if you want to go on the outside as well.
Halo kind of already did that by being set predominantly in a big ring.
I think what they might do a kind of Prey style, people being able to stand on walls in gravity wells type thing, maybe to mix it up a bit. That'd be.
Would that be like odd. Taking Titanfall to its extreme? Because you could wall run in that.
And you just stand on a wall.
I couldn't wall run in that.
You can stop. Wall stop.
Wall stop.
Wall sit down.
That's infinite.
Wall sleep.
Infinite warfare.
Infinite warfare, more like.
I enjoyed Alice's take on it on RPS, which was basically just this recursive thing where you get smaller and smaller and smaller and sort of fight your way along your own, gun at one point or knife blade or something, it was, that sounded pretty great, actually.
I imagine infinity is referring to the infinite depths of space.
Yes.
Where there is only war.
Yeah. And no one can hear you war.
No one hears.
I'd be interested in a Call of Duty set in space, even if it is called Infinite Warfare.
Yeah. I mean, do you need a UAV in space? What is a UAV in space? A little satellite?
Unmanned aerial vehicle. That's a drone. Wait, what? Oh, they have them in Call of Duty. Yeah, sorry. I feel like I'm not really making a good showing of myself. I've been really good all day, and then suddenly podcast and everything collapses.
That notwithstanding, I just, I've totally lost my...
It would be one of those a lunar rover, right?
Maybe deploy a little Curiosity rover.
Yeah.
Kill Street reward, that'd be good. It depends how in space it is.
But a kill streak reward for science. That's what... I'm just going to stop. Sorry.
That's the thing that's been unclear, because every Call of Duty's toyed with getting closer and closer to full-on science fiction. But so my assumption would be that they are going a bit to space, but not a lot to space, where I would define Halo as a lot to space, whereas having some lasers and maybe Red Faction is a bit in space.
Yeah, maybe like a Moonraker style scenario where it's on the moon and various bases. Yeah, I mean, I like that they're moving away from modern warfare with all the kind of weird politics and the political kind of grey areas they get into with that.
They'll find a way. It'll be China in space.
COD finds a way.
Transhumanist kind of.
Yeah, they had a kind of exoskeletons and stuff, didn't they?
Yeah,
I think, in one of them.
and you basically had upgrades and stuff, and I can't remember. Was that the one with Kevin Spacey, or was that the one before that? That was the one before that, wasn't it? But that was sort of, you had an augmented hand.
Yeah, in that one, Kevin Spacey augments your hand after you lose it in a big robot.
No, you don't lose it in a robot. Don't you lose it in an explosion when his son dies?
But it's an exploding robot helicopter, I thought.
But it's still a helicopter, not a robot. It's not like the helicopter is like a transformer and has arms and can
No, but you don't need arms to be a robot. We're just going to argue this entire I thought it was like a drone helicopter thing. That's my definition of a robot.
It looked like a helicopter.
I think it did open with a space mission, though. There is a space mission in, I think, the last Call of Duty, where you're on a space station and some sort of laser is happening, maybe, and it's all breaking apart. And they have like the craft is boarded by other people, and you have to shoot them with space machine guns.
Isn't that the opening of Call of Duty Modern Warfare Ghosts 2?
I have no idea.
They haven't made a second Ghosts.
No, Ghosts I think opens with like an orbital rail gun.
Yeah.
Blowing up the Earth.
Yeah, like one of them. No, they nuke or they explode a town like in North America from orbit, and that's why you're wandering around with your dog, because there's also like a fun fair on a precipice. And it wouldn't have been built there, obviously, so it must have been as a result of
a big tungsten rod from space
nuke thing. And then you're sort of going through houses and working your way through this thing, and you have to do some jumping, and there's a man.
And a dog.
Yeah. He was good.
We liked him.
I didn't really get very far with that game.
No, but I thought that one opened with the space station that fired the tungsten
Yeah,
rods
you're
being
out
hijacked
there,
by
I think,
Yes.
can't you?
hijacked by space terrorists.
Yeah, and then it disintegrates, and you kind of fly out into space. And it looks quite good.
And it does that thing with your first person hands where you're like, oh no, I'm in space.
You're just flapping
And
around.
you're dead.
Yeah. Do a bit of space flap.
So I think
doesn't work.
we can basically say that we know so little about the Call of Duty series, despite having played quite a lot of them, that we can't really look ahead into the future in any meaningful way.
No.
They'll just have to make it not Destiny. Blizzard would probably be frowning upon that if they tried to do too many Destiny type things, even though Destiny is good space fights.
It's interesting because it will just be a 6-hour campaign and multiplayer again though, right? Like,
Yeah,
they're not
surely.
going to, push the boat out all the way into space.
No.
That would be a spaceship.
It would, yeah.
It's going to be, I bet it'll look really exciting, but then be surprisingly exactly the same in every respect.
Yeah, waiting for your buddy to open the airlock.
Yes, absolutely. There'll be a little blob over someone's head and it'll say, follow! And you'll have to follow him to the objective for her.
That would be sad, wouldn't it?
I think
it would be nicer if you could like fight the sun or something.
That'd be awesome.
That doesn't happen in Bayonetta, but almost.
And that's the news.
Speaking of war in space, where there is only war, infinite war, you might say.
Yes.
In space.
Nice, good link.
That is a good link. I almost made it earlier, but then we decided to talk bollocks about Call of Duty for an extra 5 minutes.
It's always a pleasure.
You have been playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlefleet Gothic Armada.
Oh, is that a Warhammer game? Oh, for God's sake.
It's very hard to tell these days. Just assume that a game is a Warhammer game, unless otherwise stated at this point, I think, because there are so many of them.
Yeah, Games Workshop have loaded that license into a big shotgun and just fired it at mid-tier.
Am I
publishers and
making
developers.
a Warhammer game?
Yeah, everyone is, Pip. They just don't know it yet.
Absolutely.
Fair.
It's the shotgun blast approach is interesting because you get a lot of mediocre stuff, but occasionally you'll get one that's surprisingly good, like Vermintide, like Vermintide, which was kind of Left 4 Dead style co-op assault in which you're assaulted by ratmen forever in a gothic nightmare. This is based on the aborted turn-based space tabletop game Battlefleet Gothic, which was put out of commission a while ago. But basically, all you need to know about it is that it's an RTS in space with giant ships that look like big floating space cathedrals.
Yeah, or pipe organs.
Yeah, and they've got pipe organs, and they're basically like space galleons. It's actually, you play it on a 2D plane, and a lot of your ships have side-mounted cannons, and it's about kind of positioning your ships well, but it's also more a game about activating their special abilities at the right time while they're in the right range to actually deal the maximum amount of damage. And it's a really kind of interesting and decent translation of the tabletop rules, which were very, very micro heavy. Like you were angling your ships precisely, and there were gravity wells. You could slingshot around them using like the gravity well of a planet or a star. And you could even do that with like firing torpedoes into a gravity well, and it would sling around and hit enemies and stuff like that. That was all in the tabletop game, and they've kind of taken all of that out for this game. The ships are kind of automated, and you just give them their orders. You say, look, I want you to stay within 3 kilometers of an enemy, because that's where your ship's guns are most effective. Then I want you to engage this guy with a priority 1, this guy with priority 2, and then you sort of let them go about their business, occasionally activating like lock-on features or a big giant super kind of Nova cannon thing that will just randomly Nuke an area is quite an unpredictable weapon. And the rhythm of it is really quite good. And the best thing about it is it has a really interesting single-player campaign, which is set across several star systems. And there are kind of tension points throughout each star system where the various races of Warhammer 40,000, including the Eldar, which are the elves, the Orcs, which are the Orcs, and probably some Tyranids at some point, which are Happy Alien Day, everyone, because it's lots of them in giant spaceships that look like them, stupidly. And
do they really just like a massive gene stealer?
A little bit, yeah. Just kind of molded together into a spike. It's pretty grim. Pretty grim. They all behave on a kind of hive mind instincts, like all of these do. It's such a cliche, really.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they can just go cling to each other and swim into space.
No. Well, but... yeah, I mean, yes, it does. Yeah, Warhammer 40,000, it absolutely can totally happen. So it's, the reason why it's good is because I've failed completely at it, but it hasn't ended yet. So I've failed so comprehensively that almost any other game would have told me to stop playing it by now. But Battlefleet Gothic has kind of endured my incompetence in a way that I actually enormously respect it for. Because every time you lose a mission, it seems to put you onto a different failure track. And I'm basically plumbing the depths of its failure tracks. I keep failing and thinking there must be a point at which the narrative just breaks down at this point, because the Chaos Lord has stolen like several of the evil artifacts he needs to destroy the universe by this point. And I've basically put in a terrible showing, and surely he could just do his business and end it now. And yet it keeps on going. It keeps letting me fuck it up. And just gradually punish me as I go. And
who are you playing as?
I'm playing as Imperials. I'm not sure you can actually play as other races yet.
Oh, okay.
Might be a future plans for DLC and stuff. But the Imperials are just kind of bit good at everything. They're probably, as in the tabletop game, the least interesting, because the Eldar have like solar sails, and if they're sideways and their solar sails are kind of exposed to the sun, they can move faster and stuff like that. The Orcs just ram stuff, and the Tyranids, I don't know what the fuck, to be honest.
You still haven't figured that out.
No,
That's why you're losing.
No, I lose in every circumstance. It's not, I can't pinpoint it. I'm just not playing it very well. I've not really learned its systems very well yet. But I'm really, really enjoying it. It kind of gives you, in each turn, you get 2 deployments, and there'll be like a story mission you take on and fail if you're me. But there's also a secondary mission that you can take on to defend one of your kind of system's planets. And as you lose them, your resources are gradually choked as you lose planets. So there's incentivizes you to push back and kind of stay on top of it. And it's really good so far. I've only played it for like 3 hours, but I'm surprised by how atmospheric it is, and it's wonderfully over the top with its cutscenes and its crazy voice acting. And just frankly,
I was going to ask about the voice acting.
It's always good. Well, not good. It's always fun hearing British actors ham it up as Chaos Lords. I am Lord of
Chaos Lord.
Chaos are basically the twisted kind of devil worshippers of the 40k universe. They come out of the Eye of Terror, or the demons do, and they corrupt men's minds and stuff, and this warps them into horrible shapes.
Oh, okay.
So a Chaos Lord would be their leader guy.
What's the difference between Warhammer and Warhammer 40k?
So Warhammer is the fantasy battle, so medieval knights and elves. And
so this one's the Space Marines.
Yes.
One?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Chaos are in both and are basically the same in both. Like Chaos is the one that isn't very different in either thing. It's still just dudes in big armor who've been corrupted by demons, and they've got skin where skin shouldn't be. And they love skulls, and they fight either knights or Space Marines, and now in New Warhammer, basically Space Marines.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad that's good. Actually, I really like the tabletop game. I was going to ask, like, given that they've removed the gravity mechanics and stuff like that, does it feel like a space game, or does it feel like an Age of Sail battle game that has a space backdrop?
Definitely the latter.
Yeah,
massively the latter. It doesn't, like, there are asteroid fields and stuff like that, but it is basically a game about boats.
Yeah.
And
so is it like
boats.
a more complicated version of Sid Meier's Pirates?
Can you go to a dance with a Chaos Lord?
I was just thinking,
and marry his daughter.
I was thinking, what? There are no social elements, sadly, in the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
I meant more in terms
There's
of
only
like bringing boats alongside each other and like making sure that you have like the turning and the distance and the.
Yeah, it's a cross between that and EVE Online, actually. In EVE Online, the way you automate your ship to stay at certain distances. It really reminded me of that, but on a 2D plane, and with kind of action bar abilities that you you use.
How does it compare to something like Homeworld, given that was remastered recently and is amazing?
Yeah, Homeworld's amazing, and it's not on the same level as Homeworld, but Homeworld is fully 3D and incredibly complicated and hard in a way that Battlefleet Gothic, even though I keep losing, I can actually make ships go places quite quickly and, learn it more easily than Homeworld. In terms of, Homeworld is unusual because it has a really good single-player campaign. So the actual story is really good.
Yeah.
And that's really, really unusual. And this does not have that caliber of story, but it makes up for it with this these systems of planets and I feel like I'm doing a strategy if I'm sitting in front of a big map of a load of systems, even if I only have 2 deployments a turn. The kind of feeling of it, I feel more like a general for the ability to actually be able to point my fleet at.
Decide what to fuck up today.
Yeah, precisely, yeah. I like lording it over the map. I always plan to fuck them up.
Badly reinforce this sextant. The sextant.
Yeah.
Can you take on, technology from the other races, if you do well, or...
No, it's
That'd
more...
be heresy.
Would you be able to just, use their solar sails or, stuff like that? That would be cool.
That would be cool, but for law reasons and also probably balance reasons, they don't let you do it. Because in the future in 40k, the humans basically hate all aliens of any kind, and anything that looks alien. They're just massive fascists, really. And so the idea of putting massive Eldar sail on an Imperial ship would just not fly. Would be an insult to the Emperor, who is half-dead machine god.
Basic a skeleton in a big chair.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, he sounds like a Chaos Lord.
Don't ever say that to a Space Marine. Be very displeased.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to hit you though because you're quite little and they're 8 foot tall and they can't move their arms down.
Oh, I could probably especially if he doesn't get out of his chair, I could just stand at the other side of the living room.
What do you mean?
The Chaos Lord man.
The Emperor.
The Emperor.
He can't get out of the chair.
Yeah.
He's quite well guarded though.
Oh. So I'd have to dodge the guards.
Yeah, that's pretty much how Chaos started in the 40k universe. Someone making fun of the Emperor from the other side of the room, running away.
Really passive aggressive.
Maybe I'll just stick to an anonymous blog.
An anonymous
blog.
Yeah, Chaos started out as commenters on websites, actually.
Yeah.
That was their genesis.
They emerged from the Eye of Terror with their shit opinions.
The upgrade system works on renown, which you gain by winning, which is a thing I've not done very often. So I've yet to explore that.
What does renown do? Don't know.
It unlocks higher tier slots for bigger battleships that have bigger guns on them. So I'm quite excited about it.
Yeah, it would be cool if it gave you negative renown, sort of infamy.
Oh, that'd be great. You become a Chaos Lord gradually, just through sheer unpopularity. Oh, it's that guy.
There isn't a Chaos God of incompetence.
No, there should be. There should be. Maybe I am. And that's what I am in this game.
Maybe that's the story track.
That would be amazing.
The ultimate sort of revelation is...
It would be better than Homeworld if that was the twist.
Battlefleet fucked it.
It would be amazing if it let you properly revel in your own sort of incompetence.
But apparently
before,
it does.
That's what I'm enjoying about
back.
it.
Yeah.
This terrible voice acting, they berate you afterwards and say, "It's been a terrible failure, Commander." Stuff like that.
We take ourselves very seriously, and we don't think you are.
We have a terrible system for getting rid of incompetent fucks. It's great.
Have you got tenure?
Maybe that's how it works. I'm really looking forward to playing more of it because I want to get good at it. And it's possible that until I understand it properly, that it might have gaping flaws with its systems that I'm not aware of yet. So don't take it as a complete recommendation.
You've just been charmed by your inability.
Yeah.
Does it have, what's the multiplayer like?
It has it. I've not done it because I can't beat the computer yet. So I can't face a human.
Maybe everyone's terrible about it. Maybe the computer's just amazing in multiplayer is where it's actually...
Maybe so. I'm going to comfort myself with that thought.
Yeah. Is there skirmish modes or anything where you can practice?
Yeah, there are skirmish modes and stuff like that.
That's quite full featured then.
Yeah, it feels like a full release. Doesn't feel like it's got nice production values as well. Looks quite nice.
Does it sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Nice. Cannons, space cannons.
That kind of stuff.
Yep. Do orcs shout in space? I've got so many questions.
No one can hear them shout in space. That's the...
I'd love it if you heard them coming in. They do kind of. They've got these cutscene bits, which are a bit like Homeworld. They're just animated paintings, and you hear the orcs a lot in that. And the sound of an orc is the same in every game that has ever been made about Warhammer. And it's, oh, lads. That's the sound of
I think that's the opening of a song for Pirates of Penzance.
They are pirates. Like, the orc,
just needs a piano, like arpeggio.
appearing soon at a bath pub near you on a honky tonk.
Yeah.
The orc.
Battlefield Gothic, the musical.
Oh, they could have that at the Cider Festival next year.
Oh, it'd be better than the Wurzel's tribute band that we're forced to endure every year. Yeah, the orc commander actually does wear a tricorner hat with skulls on it.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually
they're just fucking pirates.
Yeah, they're just fucking pirates.
It's interesting because, you know, if it is an Age of Sail game, elves obviously have, you know, the ships they would have in Lord of the Rings, like, you know, big sailboats, elegant sailboats.
They even look
Always
like that.
heading to the east.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
It's a big tactical flaw with their battle plans.
Well, not on the Earth, it's round.
Also, their space battles
get there
are
eventually.
fundamentally based on going away from the sun, which is like a tactical weakness as well.
That is true. You can use that in the tabletop game.
You'd have to do it like, maybe you could do stuff like gravity slingshotting, you know? Like how they do, like use the orbital velocity to sort of...
You can do that in a
ping off
tabletop
into
game. You can't do that in this.
space. But like maybe there's a way of like angling your solar sail so that you can sort of ping off into
Yeah,
space.
that's exactly how it works in the tabletop game. It's a big tactical thing about how you angle your ship to get the best sunlight. You're basically sunbathing all the time, but it's kind of ice skating between ships. But yeah, actually the computer game takes a lot of that stuff out. Probably because it's so complicated. It's already a very complicated game, but having to think about that all the time would probably overcomplicate things a bit. Even though some of the coolest stuff about Battlefleet Gothic as a rule set is that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a shame.
Maybe the reason the Tyranids make no sense is because there's no easy correlation for them in a kind of Age of Sail thing, where the Chaos and humanity are both equivalent, big galleons in space. Orcs are pirates, elves are elves, Eldar are elves. Tyranids are what exactly? Like, what if fish decided to make a boat?
Yeah.
They're Krakens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, you know, like that's an analogy, isn't it? Reaching out of the water and like crushing those who would disobey them.
Disobey them?
Well, you know, disobey the laws of the sea or something. I think I might be confusing Krakens with Aquaman. Or with my screenplay for Aquaman, where he's actually a detective. Possibly. What? And he has an argument with the jury about an evil whale.
What is this a thing?
This is a screenplay that I legit started writing about Aquaman.
Oh, okay.
Pip,
I thought it was something you could watch.
No, not yet.
Coming soon to a theatre near you.
To be honest, DC Cinematic Universe needs all the help it can get at the moment.
Yeah, I've watched
So
that.
this is basically the only way they pull it back.
Yeah. The Kraken is a good analogy because it's a big monstrous beast that attacks unpredictably, and that's kind of what the Tyranids do. They swarm a bit as well.
Like fish.
Yeah.
Shoal.
Yeah. Exactly.
School. Sorry.
I think we might have exhausted all the mileage in
Fish.
Battlefield Gothic Armada.
Yeah. Fair.
Pip,
Hello.
what have you been playing?
Well, today I played a few things. I played Jalopy, if you want to talk about that.
Let's talk about Jalopy.
Sounds good.
So it's so far it seems to be that you build and maintain a car and its, you know, associated bits like the engine and the
Wheels.
fuel, and you have to put the wheels on. I did the tutorial. And so at that point you start transporting your uncle about the place. But I'm not entirely sure what happens afterwards, because I played it once at the PC Gamer Weekender and then became more and more conscious of the fact that I was spending a lot of time monopolising the PC for this, and other people might want to have a go. I think I got relatively far on that one because I was doing the tutorial where you actually build the car, or rather your uncle is standing there and talks you through what all of the different bits do, like the carburetor and the air filter and the fuel tank and things, and like the balance of, or how you set up the ratio of gas to oil in the engine will affect like the performance and sort of the power that you can give the car versus the wear on the engine. And then like you've put all of this together, you've put the door back on the car, you've got your wheels all in place, and then you head off into the wilds of Eastern Europe to head to Dresden. And I don't think I got to Dresden at the weekender. I ended up at like a gas station and was trying to figure out how to fix the car or refuel it or something. And so, but I was kind of interested and wanted to play more, and then it came out in early access on Monday. So I picked that up and I got through the beginning bit of the tutorial. So I had my car, I was like heading off onto the Autobahn, and I stopped to take a screenshot while I was going uphill because it was just quite nice. It's like lo-fi kind of graphics, you know, like quite blocky, quite sort of muted palette for like this sort of Soviet sort of era kind of thing. And I think I managed to accidentally lose all of my momentum going up the hill. And so I took my screenshot and then I was trying to then just sort of go back to driving. But I was going slowly backwards instead, and like no amount of pressing W, because it's WASD on the thing, would actually make the car go forwards. And so I sort of tried doing like the thing that you would do in real life, which is, you know, put the handbrake on, like turn the engine up, you know, it's like, it's got all of these like really detailed little touches. So you can do all of that. You put the handbrake on, you sort of turn the engine off, turn it back on. I was trying to work out whether there was a way to get the biting point for the engine. So I could like start to feel it maybe drag forward a little bit, and that just wasn't working. And so I took the handbrake off and like started going backwards again. I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And then I started hearing beeping from behind me, and it's like, it's that sense of like stress and like pressure of this person. I was like, it's not my fault. I can't make the car go forwards. I'm not sure what to do, because like it wasn't like out of fuel, like nothing seemed to be broken or anything. And then I jumped out of my skin because I got properly rammed. Like the AI seemed to have just got really pissed off with me and rammed me. I was like, oh, okay, well that was annoying, because like there's two lanes like next to me, so it could have gone around, I guess. And so I started to take that personally, and I couldn't really do anything. So I ended up just sort of zooming backwards, because like I thought I would try and see whether maybe the controls had got inverted by accident or something. So I thought I'd try going backwards and see whether I ended up going forwards. And I didn't. I went properly backwards. And then the beeping like continued, and I tried to make myself sound far more reasonable when I wrote this up for RPS. But what actually happened was I just like full on got some like blocky road rage and started just properly like going backwards to try and ram this guy back down the road so that I could try building my momentum up to like get over the hump and carry on my merry way to Dresden. But what ended up happening was like I started tilting up, like as if the back of the car was in the air, and I realised I was actually like monster truck style, like running back over his bonnet. I was like properly like going for it, but then I sort of lost momentum on that as well. And so now the situation is that the hill is forming kind of the downstroke of a V, and me sort of humping this other car's bonnet is forming the upstroke of the V. So my car is completely stuck. My uncle won't get out or talk to me or help. He's just like catatonic in the front seat, like just in the passenger seat. And I don't really have any way of getting to Dresden except for walking. So
wow.
I'm not entirely sure what to do. I haven't quite given up hope. I feel like there should be another way around this. But the game's sort of in pre-alpha, so it's entirely likely that there isn't another way around this, and I might just walk to Dresden. That might just be what I do.
That's probably the point of the game. Fuck cars.
I'm wondering what would happen if I managed it, you know? Would I get run over by, like, the friend of this AI?
You've left your relative behind, though, wouldn't you, in the car?
That's true. I don't know what... Yeah, like, maybe if I took my passport, because I've got my passport, I took my map, you know.
That sounds like a diary feature in the making, to be honest.
What's the deal with your uncle?
So, this is the thing where I feel like I don't quite know enough about the premise of the game, as in, like, I sort of deliberately didn't look at the story side of things because I wanted it to unfold as I was driving. Like, I felt like there was an actual sort of journey side of this that I was interested in. So I didn't really look sort of too closely at that side of things. I was just sort of interested in the car maintenance and stuff. I'm not entirely sure whether that will be fun or onerous. I suspect it will depend on the type of person that you are. But like, because it really is that sort of granular level of detail when it comes to the engine. Like, it explains to you about what the air filter does and why it's like it's not a vital component, but it's still important, and it explains to you about an ignition coil, and it explains to you about, you know, all of that kind of...
oh, wow, so it's really kind of granular when it comes to the systems of the way the car moves.
Basically, there's only, like, maybe 8 different bits that you put in the engine at the start, but they are still, you know, like, they're all things that the implication is that you'll need to monitor over time and choose, you know, if you run low on a particular resource, like maybe water or something, then you'll obviously be sacrificing like visibility through your windscreen and stuff. And it's got like hazard lights, like a button for hazard lights, and it's got like, you know, high beams and stuff and an indicator and things like that. So yeah, like, I'm really interested to see how it develops and whether I continue liking it, but at the moment I'm dealing with a bit of a rear-ending / vicious reversing incident. So, reminds
me of Receiver.
I was going to mention Receiver.
Yeah.
Just that's another game that goes into which Receiver is a cool experimental FPS where you have to deal with everything to do with the gun you actually have to deal with in terms of taking the clip out, putting the bullets in, cocking it correctly, every aspect of actually operating the mechanical reality of a gun, rather than just clicking and having it fire every time.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
I got so flustered with that game. Like, I was just so ham-fisted when it came to actually sort of the rhythm of reloading or the rhythm of actually fiddling with all the different bits. And so, like, Jalopy will be a sort of more macro version of that. Like, it won't be as sort of twitchy, I think. But yeah, like, I'm kind of curious to see what else it does, and also why I'm going to Dresden, like whether I've just sort of totally missed something like explanatory while faffing around at the start.
It's a good mystery to like pull you along, maybe.
Yeah, I hope so. I think we're going to meet someone or fetch someone or do something.
Any one of those things. Something will happen.
Anyway.
Well, that's to resolve an event.
Oh, but the developer tweeted the official RPS account to say, I'm doing an AI fix this afternoon that will hopefully, you know, like alter your AI experience. And we've disciplined the AI responsible, which is really sweet.
Oh,
that's nice. Discipline the AI responsible.
Yeah. So that was really nice.
I love that if game development was that, you just scold code if it goes wrong. Bad code. Bad code.
But yeah, so that was what I've been doing. Christopher, have you been playing things?
I played a lot of Dark Souls 3, but I'm done with talking about Dark Souls 3 now. Killed a man while only in my pants. I say a man, I mean a big skeleton.
Yeah, that's good. That's just Dark Souls, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. But I have also played a little bit of, admittedly, want to play more of, Tabletop Simulator, which I was going to mention briefly. Don't have a huge amount to say about it because I imagine if you care about it, then you probably already use it. But I was quite impressed because I got into it because a couple of friends are using it to practice the X-Wing miniatures game that I'm mega into, and the any way we can do to get loads of practice in before regionals and nationals is a good thing. So we're all taking it probably way too seriously now. But
you made it sound like a high school singing competition or like Glee or something.
It's a lot like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we make regionals. then everything will be fine, and we get to the credits with a montage and kind of where are they now, end of prom kind of thing. It's exactly like that.
Just call one of your lists Sparkle Motion.
Yeah.
Go right to the top.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple of different online ways of playing X-Wing. They're all kind of a bit jury-rigged and weird, and Tabletop Simulator is kind of the new one because there is a set of Steam Workshop plugins that are actually really good. Like, people put a lot of that. So Tabletop Simulator is a Lua scripting supported simulation of a tabletop, and you buy the game and it comes with a whole bunch of traditional board games and things. But as an interface, it's really clever because it is just, you have a little digital hand, you draw the mouse, and you can pick up and rotate and manipulate 3D objects in 3D space. And you can load in with somebody else and you can see their cursor and have voice communication with them. And so therefore, technically anything you can play with a table and pieces, you can then play with each other. So you can use it for Dungeons and Dragons sessions, or doing jigsaw puzzles together, or playing chess or mahjong or checkers or anything you want. And then people have modded in loads of commercial board games. And I'm not actually sure of the legality of that. Like, there's loads of people play Magic the Gathering, they play Netrunner.
I think, and I might be totally wrong, but I think Paul Dean of Shut Up and Sit Down maybe wrote about the legality of it, or has written about Tabletop Simulator for sure. So
I shall Google it.
Might
and if
be
he
worth,
has,
if he has, show notes perhaps.
Yeah. I think the thing that protects it from being that both stops it from being a proper computer game version of a board game that you say, Battlefleet Gothic is a turn-based space combat game that transitioned to PC. I think X-Wing would transition brilliantly if someone made it. This isn't that, because if you don't know the rules of X-Wing and you're not pretty comfortable with it, you can't play, I don't think, using Tabletop Simulator because it's quite fiddly, and there are plugins and kind of things that, little scripts and commands you can use to kind of automate things that you would do by hand in the tabletop version. But it's all stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think to need to do if you didn't know what you would be trying to do if you were playing it for real. So, and it doesn't, obviously there's no tutorial explaining any of that. It's just a set of tools that allow you to simulate a tabletop game, but presumes that you will come to that with all the knowledge required. And to the extent that, first couple of games I played really badly just because I was relearning loads of how to do stuff. But I'm really impressed by the software, actually, more than anything else. We can talk about X-Wing, but it's really not a PC game. But it's a cool thing to exist, and it's nice that, because board games are such a specific community, and it's nice that there's a home for people to just jump onto a PC of an evening and find an open server where they can just play Netrunner against somebody else, or play board game Twilight Struggle.
Oh yeah.
Which now actually has recently got a proper computer game version. But as those things sort of make their way to PC, it's nice that this sort of thing exists. And some of the stuff is crazy. There's one board you can load up which is just tools, like a working calculator and all that kind of thing. But one of them is a working iPad with a browser, and you can just load a browser.
Wow.
That works on an object inside the game world, which is super cool.
That's really cool.
I don't know if they're planning VR integration, but they totally should, because it'd be amazing. I would totally that would actually sell me it's not stupid, but if I could use a Vive with the paddles and stuff to play X-Wing as if I was standing across the table from an actual person, like I do a couple of times a week in real life, that would be an amazing use of that technology, which is not something I'd considered, using a digital thing to play a tabletop game remotely, or even with AR, because the Vive can has a camera on the front. That would be amazing. If I set up my computer in the dining room and look at the table, and it projects this digital game through Tabletop Simulator that I can then play with someone else digitally.
That's really interesting. I think it'd be an amazing tool for board game developers, a way of them playtesting their stuff. So one of the things with board games is it's very hard to QA test them, because you can't just send out millions of boards of your game, print out loads and loads of copies and get them out to people. Whereas if you kind of throw together a rule set in this simulator and then release it to everyone and say, hey, play it and let us know what's going on, you could actually get do an alpha, a proper broad alpha for a board game.
Yeah.
So that's really, really interesting.
It's interesting watching tabletop communities kind of react to that stuff as well, because, the big thing about tabletop games. Like Hearthstone this week is undergoing a pretty dramatic change, tabletop style, as they're retiring expansions, which is what Magic the Gathering does.
Yes.
In order to
keep it
Or
with
at
the
least
card
for their standard mode. For Wild, you can still play them.
Yeah, but they are adopting that method for the competitive play. And the reason they're doing it is because, weirdly, even though Hearthstone is a digital game, it uses a lot of the sort of logic and shorthand and business structure of Magic the Gathering, say, with expansions and booster packs and stuff, to the point where while you can make changes to the cards in a digital game in the way that you couldn't possibly with a physical game, it's not that desirable to do so. And it's easier, and they can back themselves into design corners quite quickly, so they're actually adopting a tabletop method of retiring expansions to fix a digital game, which is really interesting. But the reverse is sort of happening in the way the X-Wing community works is, new packs come out with new ships and upgrades and stuff, and people get very excited about it. But in the run-up to those models physically arriving, and you need the physical stuff to play them in tournaments and things, stuff gets revealed ahead of time. Fantasy Flight can make the game, put stuff out on the internet. And the moment the information exists, that this is what the card's going to be, this is how many points it costs, these are the values on the card, it can easily be simulated within Tabletop Simulator or Vassal, which is the other piece of software that gets used, which is another board game simulator, a bit more rudimentary. And so players of the game are testing this stuff extensively for months, sometimes, before the cargo ship with the physical stuff arrives.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is the developers of the game don't quite seem to have yet figured out that that's a beta resource for them.
Yeah.
Because they have the option to go, oh shit, people found a huge, this happened in the latest wave of the X-Wing meta, where something was discovered by the players ahead of the ships coming out.
Yes.
That wasn't anticipated by the developers. And when it came out, people were sort of like, holy shit, I didn't see this coming. This kind of, not a degenerate thing, but a bit of a, cheesy new strat. The developer said, well, it didn't come up in our playtesting. But weirdly, it came up in the simultaneous playtesting that's happening online by the community. And so there's a really interesting intersection between developers of physical games and developers of, and the methodologies of developing digital games, and vice versa. As they sort of trade ideas, but they don't seem to be 100% talking to each other yet.
Yeah, it's interesting because presumably all they'd have had to do was hang out on X-Wing Reddit and seen it, because players would have been talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a small, the thing is, there's a small sort of elite community of people who take this really seriously, who were kind of not keeping this to themselves, but it took a while for that to filter out to the rest of the community.
Sure.
And in that case, actually, it filtered out right before the ships came out. And so when the physical stuff came out, one particular thing went out of stock everywhere, because the day before on Reddit, someone had gone, this is it, this is the overpowered thing, and you need 3 of them. And so, that's super interesting. Just the way,
but it's also, you'd need to sort of factor that in terms of because from what you're saying, even if they had been keeping an eye on that stuff or had figured it out from following those conversations, they're hemmed into a particular production line as well. And if the thing is going to come out in a week and people have already figured that out, but there's no way to call back all of that stuff.
That's true,
or reprint or,
Well, and that's the thing, with the physical game, the cards are printed and on boats 8 weeks before.
Yeah.
And so, but it's interesting because maybe these developers of physical games need to start thinking like video game developers and announcing stuff really early so that there's still time for them to change it.
Yeah.
Because what they probably do is they finalize it. They probably have a traditional, publishing way of thinking about it where they finalize it. Then they do the blog post saying, get excited, this is what's in the pack.
And then nothing changes.
And the stuff is made in China and put on a big cargo ship and off it goes. But then meanwhile, in that 8 weeks while it's going across the ocean, the community pulls it apart, figures out what's broken and what isn't, and what's the optimal way of running it. So by the time it arrives, it probably needs a patch, which is kind of why, patches for big games go into a beta phase.
But I guess for X-Wing, patches are a product in and of themselves that they sell to people. So in a way, patching is part of their business model.
But you'd have to standardise for the competitive stuff, so you'd have to say if particular cards weren't allowed or if the values had changed, and you just have to change it on your...
This gets into, I guess, the specifics of a tabletop game to be PC gaming, but But
it's interesting, how obviously with Hearthstone, they've sort of found ways around that, but they are still sort of looking back to what Magic has done, or sort of how other games in that genre, but in that physical genre sort of work. Something that I was going to ask about with Tabletop was, you said about like how you have all these scripts and like 3D models and stuff. Can you actually get the software to figure out whether people have won or lost or points or all of that stuff? Like there isn't a script that says, I am currently playing X-Wing, you know, these are the parameters. This is what I mean. This is what I mean when I say that you couldn't treat this as the X-Wing computer game, because if you don't know the rules of X-Wing, then you don't know. You know, it doesn't know if you've broken a rule. It doesn't know if you're doing it correctly or incorrectly, or if a move is valid or invalid. But there's not even like things. A rudimentary thing. It is still people keeping tally of people. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, to the extent that you still use cards and tokens to keep track of damage and things. Like, you know, obviously the easiest thing in the world for a video game to do technically would be to count someone's hit points down from 10 to 0, but you can't do that. Like, you know how many hit points the ship has. You take away shield tokens and assign damage cards as you would in the tabletop game, literally by dragging them from a deck. You know, it is literally like a simulation of the physical game. Yeah, no, that makes sense. It was more just because when you mentioned about having plugins or having like extra like bells and whistles that you could add on, then I thought like someone might have. The things it's simulated are the stuff that's really fiddly. So the tabletop game is a lot about. It's very analog. It's a lot about minuscule gradations in angle and distance. So it's not like a turn-based grid game, for example, where you are moving, you know, like XCOM or something, where everything is measured in kind of big, chunky, quite digital units. It's very, very analog. And so, given that there's a physicsy slapstickness to Tabletop Simulator, like at any time you can use the flip command to just flip the table over. And you can undo it, thank God, but it just sends every physics object, which is everything, like just scattered into the void. That's awesome. And so like when you set up your own server, you're encouraged to like set the admin controls so that people who join can't flip the table, because you can just log in and screw someone's Netrunner game up by just flipping the table and walking away. I got an achievement the other day for playing for an hour without flipping a table. And you can also you can choose whether you pick things up by like grabbing them and moving them, or by like flicking them with like an elastic kind of flicking kind of interface. So it is all about this sort of tactile physicality. Yeah, that's very interesting. But for that reason, you know, in real life, you have a degree of, you know, fine control with your hands. Yeah. So the reason that I asked as well was because I really love jigsaw puzzles, but like, how would it know that you'd put the jigsaw bit in the right place? So there are ways of locking things in place, and like there is controls for that kind of thing. The stuff for X-Wing is because there are ultimately a finite amount of maneuvers a ship can do. There is like a command line where you can enter 3 bank left, and it will do that perfectly. It will move it the exact right distance, which you can do in real life quite easily, but it's quite hard to do if you're like manually trying to flop a cardboard template into place and then flop the ship into the right place. Okay. So it's stuff like that, but it's like if you didn't know when you would do that or why that would be valid, or when it becomes invalid, then you can't play the game. So that's why I'm saying that it's a really cool piece of software, and I'm really glad that it exists, particularly as somebody who's increasingly getting into that form of competitive play. Yeah. But it is still a vehicle for people who already play this game in one form or another. That said, I have a friend who wants to learn, and I think I might try and teach him using the software. But it would be a lot harder than getting him around the house and just playing it properly. Yeah. Which is sort of still the barrier, I guess. But someone should make a computer game with that game, because it's amazing. And I'm kind of amazed Fantasy Flight aren't. I would be amazed if Fantasy Flight weren't talking to game developers now, because they have Netrunner, X-Wing, the Game of Thrones TCG, Imperial Assault, Star Wars game. There's just such a great big crossover between video game people who like video games, people who like board games as well, and it feels like there are board gamers who don't know they like video games yet, and there'll be video game players who don't know they like board games yet. It feels like they can tap into each other's worlds in interesting ways. Yeah, well, the crazy thing is now that like in miniatures war game, we were talking about Warhammer game, right? Like, and the fact that Games Workshop has shotgunned that license all the way across the face of computer games. X-Wing, the miniatures game, is now the biggest miniatures game in the world. It is now bigger than Warhammer, which is kind of nuts, like, given that Warhammer has got this 25-year history, 30-year history maybe. Yeah. And so, given that it's Star Wars, it seems like a matter of time until surely that gets that makes sense. But maybe it simply clashes with what Disney wants Star Wars on PC to mean, because that game is the opposite of Battlefront. Yeah, very true. But anyway.
Cool games. Maybe we should do a separate podcast where I talk about plastic spaceships.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Shall we do questions from questions?
Yes.
That's the first question. And the answer, Pip?
Yes. I was going to say no, but then I didn't really know what would happen if you just said, "Oh, well, okay,
end the
good."
podcast.
It's never happened before.
We'll
I don't know
leave,
what happened.
Yeah.
No, it's the line we've never crossed.
Okay. It's a personal podcast Rubicon. I'm going to just let you do questions.
Personal Rubicon.
Sorry, yes.
That's my favourite can of drink from a kebab van. Tasty Rubicon mango. Anyway, moving on.
There's going to be more food chat later.
There's going to be more food chat coming.
This is the second podcast where we've mentioned mangoes in a row.
It is.
That's what Pip's really brought to the podcast.
Just
solid mango
mangoes
chat.
everywhere.
Mangoes bring the mango chat to the pod. And they're like,
yeah, why not?
some mangoes are shit. See last week's pod for details.
Yeah, that was informative and instructional.
It was, actually. I learned a lot.
So, these questions.
So, yeah.
I've heard a
Speaking
lot
of
about them.
mangoes, Chris writes, not me, a different Chris, a nice Chris, actually, that we met in America last year on my birthday.
Aww.
Right.
Yes.
Could we get a pip of insight into the new Dota 2 patch? And then Spad from community followed up with, or Chris tell us, which is an even more laboured Dota item joke.
Not getting any of these, I'll be honest.
No, there's an item called a Pipe of Insight.
And an
I
item
understand.
called Chrystalis. Excellent work, chaps.
Good. I've forgotten the question, but I think Dota is involved.
So yeah, there's a... I haven't played
there
Dota.
was a patch,
There's a very,
yes.
very big Dota patch this week. And we're always never sure how to start talking about this to an audience that maybe not necessarily 100% on board with Dota, because I'd happily talk to other Dota people about it and why it's exciting. But we were talking about this last night, Pip, like how you make this interesting to people who don't give a fuck about the fact that strength scales slightly better now, but intelligence scales differently.
To be fair, I'm slightly in that camp, but yes.
Yeah.
I was very excited about the patch. Something that I've been thinking about though, because League also had a big old, or has a big old patch. It's their mage update, which is sort of affecting a whole bunch of mage champions. But also they've done some interesting things, or I think interesting things, with how one of their non-champion objectives works, which is the dragon. Like, the dragon is like this sort of mini-boss on the map that you take down, and you sort of you get a buff for doing so. And the most recent dragons before this patch was announced was that you got a different thing, a different bonus every time you brought it down until you reached 5, and then the 5th one would bestow a buff that only lasted a certain amount of time, and so you could sort of keep getting that buff again and again every time it respawned if you wanted to. But there was kind of this thing where, so if you fell behind in the number of dragons that you got, you'd be a bit like, oh well, you know, there's not really much point, and there's so much, you know, like, so it sort of only became worth it if you were getting more of them, I guess it felt like. And so they've reworked that, and now before the 35-minute mark you'll get a dragon that's linked to a particular element, so you'll get fire, earth, wind and water.
Heart.
And you'll always know what's coming up, but it means that you can pay attention to the ones you want or what you're doing at any given time. So like the earth one will help you siege turrets and things like that, and the fire one will help you against enemy heroes, and the water one is about sort of regeneration, and the wind one is about movement out of combat. And I know I'm not making that sound really interesting, but that's part of the problem, is that to me that's like, oh, that's like, that feels like a really big change, and it's really interesting, and it'll change the pacing of the games around that bit of the map specifically, and sort of after the 35-minute mark it'll change again. And so I'm sort of looking at that as somebody who sort of watches relatively like large amounts of competitive League and kind of going, I really want to see how this plays out, and it's kind of an interesting riff on this beast that I felt like they didn't really hit the mark with more recently. But then, it also ties into just these sort of conversations that I've been wanting to have with people about making games that you develop over a number of years and sort of keep in development and keep tweaking, because it ties into ideas of whether you are aiming for sort of a theoretical perfect form of your game, or whether you're sort of like working to different ideas at any given time, or sort of what you're focusing down in on. And a guy called Michael Johnson wrote a piece for me for RPS about, he interviewed Greg Street, who's the design director for Riot for League of Legends, and was sort of saying about how they keep this idea of a perfect form of the game as an ideal to work towards, but not something that's attainable in any sort of version of reality that we'll ever get, because there's too many variables.
Presumably it's not even desirable, because surely it stagnates if it becomes perfect.
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah. Because one of the ideas is that, if you have perfect balance, then everything is equally viable, etc., etc. So you would get like this more balanced, or like this non-stale thing, because everything could be played. And I guess at that point you'd maybe theoretically end up with a maybe even just a looping structure, where if you know that someone plays a certain way, then you have like the counter to that, and then someone else has the counter to you, and all of that stuff. But in reality, I think it probably would stagnate, because of just the fact that people have particular strengths, and they wouldn't be as versatile as the game theoretically could be, I guess. And also because of even just how people perceive the game. If something is perceived to be strong, then that's what will get played, even if it isn't. Like, really, there was I did an interview with Jeffrey Lynn, who is also he's I can't remember what his job title is, but he also is the person that you'll hear talking a lot about player behavior and conduct. But he was saying how they, I think in one of the patches, had said or implied that they'd nerfed a particular champion, but the change actually didn't happen in that patch. Like, it got left out, like the actual sort of technical implementation didn't happen, but the reaction and the play rate for that champion dropped as if it had. So, sort of the psychology of the player base will also come into it, and that's not something that you can balance out anyway. Like, it's... Yeah. And to me, that's so fascinating, and just sort of like with the Dota patch, like they've dropped in a whole bunch of new items, and they've reworked how a bunch of heroes' skills work, and they've added different sort of parameters when you're playing particular modes of the game, and you've got like this thing where you can just use it to scan an area and see whether there's sort of anyone in it. Like, it's kind of a yes-no kind of ward almost, that you only have very sort of sparing use of. But like, all of those things have the power to affect the game. And you know, Chris and I were on Skype with a bunch of our friends, and we were sort of going through it and getting really excited, or sort of, going through all of these changes because they mean stuff to us. And I think that's also part of the community side of it, because you imagine that that's sort of happening the world over amongst this community, and it happens with League, and it happens with any other game that somebody's built a community around. They'll sort of be on Skype with their mates, or they'll be on the subreddit going, holy shit, what have they done to so and so, or like, this changes everything, or and it might change absolutely nothing, but there's that moment of excitement and possibility. And I've given a talk before about how it almost feels like Fashion Week as well. Like, something gets reworked and you get to sort of use it anew, or sort of fit it to yourself and your play style in a new, different, interesting way. And yeah, like, I don't think that's really answered their question at all, but maybe it's a different way of talking about patch notes that is maybe slightly more accessible if you don't follow Dota.
I think something I would add is that I find that the character of a Dota patch is quite different to any other game I've known competitively, including any comparable game in the same genre. Dota is unusually and profoundly idiosyncratic in a way that no other game in that genre is, because it has a primary designer, a single primary designer who genuinely makes calls. It's basically still Ice Frog's game,
right?
In the manner that a modder kind of just manages their thing, with the support of a very small team by industry standards. Despite being the second biggest game, it's a factor of 100 smaller than League. Like, it's kind of nuts. Wow. And what that translates to is actually a kind of weirdly scattershot approach. Like, League, it makes an interesting comparison because League just got a very targeted update. Like,
they've been targeted of late, and to be fair, I didn't follow the game very closely before that, but I think my understanding of it is that it wasn't as targeted, it was notable that it was the Marksman update or the Juggernaut. It started with the Juggernaut update.
For sure.
The Mage update. I
mean, no, obviously we're talking about degrees of difference, but it's a shift that League has definitely made. Whereas this Dota patch is notable because it's, even though this is a hugely commercial game now and a big deal from a major platform holder in a way and all that kind of thing, it still has a lot of the same qualities as an update to Dota All-Stars, to the extent that someone showed up. So one of the new items in this patch called a Windlace, which allows you to spend a small amount of gold to boost your movement speed, which you couldn't previously do, in a kind of flat way on top of your shoes. Right. Adding laces to your shoes makes sense. Dota makes sense.
You can also now eat books, which makes sense given that you could eat trees.
Yeah, exactly. And then someone popped up on Reddit to say, hey, so 6 years ago in 2010, I invented this item. And links to a Play Dota forum post from 2010 where he says, how about Windlace? Costs 450 gold and gives you 20 movement speed. And it's exactly the same. So it's not even him saying, I came up with this idea, but I called it something else. Ice Frog wrote that down and then 6 years later went back to the book of things I might include in this game one day and just full on put it in the game.
Yeah.
And the game has that really interesting history of people recognizing 10 years later, holy shit, I invented Sand King. on a Dota All-Stars forum post in 2007, I created this character that is now being played at tournaments this level. And the other flip side to that, one of the, this patch notes joke is a minuscule change to a character called Puck, adjusting one of his abilities by such a small amount that it's totally meaningless. Which had happened before. There was a running joke that I think it was the cooldown on Darkseer's vacuum ability got changed in every patch, from patch after patch after patch.
Okay.
And so for the one where he finally didn't get changed, they added a patch note which is reduced Darkseer's vacuum cooldown by 0.0 seconds, and it really confused people. But it was just so that he was in the patch notes still. And they always do something like that. But this time, so about 4 days ago on Reddit, someone posted at the time of we're recording this. Someone posted this great post, which was they had fed the last couple of years of Dota patch notes into a Markov chain text generator, which looks for associations and kind of syntax and regenerates a new thing that it thinks is in the same form as the thing it's been fed. So it was a machine's attempt to write something like Dota patch notes. And I think if you don't play Dota, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Right.
Because it's just fucking nonsense. But some of the changes are amazing. It's Kunka's torrent delivers 4 times more experience if all the heroes are in the forest, which is nonsense if you play Dota, but it's not. One of the lone druid patch notes is lone druid has died.
Fantastic.
Which is but on that list of Markov text generated patch notes was Puck illusory orb speed increased by 1, which is minuscule. So they just put that in the patch. They put that in the actual patch.
Wow, that's
they just took it and went fuck it, because it's such a small change that it makes no difference to the game.
Well, it'll be hilarious when it finally does.
Yeah.
It's the crucial.
Yeah, exactly. When $1
million dream coil or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think illusory orb probably moves at looks like 420 move speed or something. So
421 is not.
Yeah, no, you're not making a huge difference.
But I think our friend Dan is basically just sitting there waiting for the pro game where it makes all the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
But it's that kind of weirdly sort of anarchic approach to. We're going to throw all of these ideas in this bucket, and some of them are going to be from 6 years ago, and some of them are going to be very new, and some of them are going to bring the game closer to other comparable games, and some of them are going to move it further away. and will just basically bomb the entire game. And then, I mean, they announced it, put it on a test server for like 8 hours, and then it went live.
Well,
and like, Dota's gone now. The only concession to what was happening the rest of the scene was that they waited until the major tournament had finished before doing it. And I kind of love that about the game, because it shows a willingness to, I don't know, there's a sort of enigmatic kind of idiosyncrasy to the way that Dota changes that is still really interesting. Like, it's amazing to me that, 4 years in, I am still reliably shocked by it when it changes. Like, you think, today I was experimenting with a new change and just laughing out loud in the office at lunch, like, by myself. Like, I've laughed at Dota plenty, but I've never sat there in a solo ranked game just laughing at my flying bear cow man as he bounds from team fight to team fight. Like, yeah.
I don't know. I think with Dota, particularly with that approach, I struggle to make sense of how it works as a whole, because it doesn't when you read it like that, or at least for me it doesn't, because I just I don't have that theory crafting brain where I extrapolate from what the numbers on the page. So I read through that and I kind of go, okay, well, I can see whether a hero that I like has been affected meaningfully, I guess. But then there's a whole bunch of other stuff, like whether the changes to other heroes will then have an impact on the way I play, just sort of by dint of them existing in a slightly different way. And I find that I can't read that or get a read on it until I've played for a while. Whereas, at least with the current approach in League, I can see what they're getting at, I think, especially because at the moment their main sort of tenet is to make playing any particular character feel unique and meaningfully, like you've made a choice. Like, it's not just, oh, well, I guess I fancy playing AD carry and so I'll just pick any from this bucket of AD carry. They're trying to, I guess their manifesto at the moment is to meaningfully differentiate those experiences so that it actually matters which one you've picked or which one you want to specialize in, and it affects how you play with the rest of the people on your team. And so when their updates land, particularly when they're big ones, I find it easier to pass what they at least what they think they're doing for the game, even if it's not quite what happens. Like, I get a feel for it instantly in a way that I just can't with Dota, because it feels like someone's just turned a hose on my face.
Is it designed to be a kind of journey of discovery after a patch then? Is it a kind of figuring out?
I think, like, it depends how into the underlying maths of the Dota sandbox you are.
Okay.
Because the thing that separates Dota, this is, and people who listen to this podcast a lot will probably bored of me talking about this by now, but the reason I've always argued that Dota is a different type of game to every other game in that genre is because it has an underlying simulation. Whereas, like, in a lot of other games, characters are designed as discrete units, like game units within the game, whereas Dota relies on a lot of shared stats and shared mechanics. So you change one thing and you change a lot of things for a lot of different characters. And so you can kind of get a handle on the broad themes of a patch, often from the broadest changes. So in this case, it's the way certain stats scale has created a shift that if you're into the maths, you can see what that does. Like, I wrote about this today for PC Gamer, so I'll post put a link. But if you're interested, it is kind of an explanation of why change to the way mana scaling works is actually part of a broader shift towards a particular different type of hero that's not the one you'd expect from that, because of the underlying maths of how it works and how those characters interact with the playstyle, the mana pool, blah, 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 blah. Whereas it isn't as obvious as, like, we've changed this character in this way. It's like we changed the maths of how a stat that this character relies on works, and this has a knock-on effect on everything else. And I like the thing I like about those days of patch notes days is partly obviously discovering the exciting changes to the game, but it's also partly like admiring the problem solving that has gone on to make that happen. Where someone's identified a balance problem with the game that might concern a character that's not being picked very often, or a character that's too dominant. And the solutions to those problems, it's interesting how rarely it involves the characters in question. Really, like, obviously there'll be some changes to them, but like you can't simply read the patch notes for a given character in Dota and go, okay, this is why this character has changed. You have to understand what's happened elsewhere and how it all fits together. So you know.
Well, last night when we were on the call, I think I flippantly said something like, oh, well, nothing's happened to Witch Doctor because he's clearly perfect the way he is. But the thing there is still that something has happened to Witch Doctor. It's just that it happens outside the character, and it just affects the relationship that he has then to that world, and the items that he can then use, and how he gets played because of these other changes that have happened with regards to general roles or general affordances.
Well, it's like the new flavour of the month in Dota got a pretty big buff directly to that character, but honestly the buff he received is like the third or fourth factor in determining why he's overpowered now.
Okay.
And everything else is outside of his specific patch notes. Which is like, that's what, like, I don't know, it's number wang. It's always going to be competitive number wang, but...
Do you think they approach it less with an attitude of fixing characters and more with, like, how are we going to stir this up in a way that encourages new heroes to emerge?
Well, I think because the team at Riot sort of actively refute that idea of, like, rotational meta, because, like, that sort of implies that there's this idea of, oh, well, it's so-and-so's time now, and,
right.
Like... That was part of the stuff that Michael was writing about for RPS, because it's like they've sort of, like, the wording in some of the forum posts has kind of made a few people think, oh, okay, so you do want a rotational meta, and they've kind of gone, well, no, So but it is an interesting question, because you do sort of, it's more about, like, when I think you see that a character is being picked less and you want to know why, because if it's something like, it's got a high skill floor, even. Like, maybe it just isn't meant to be picked as much. Like, maybe if it's really complicated, then it won't be the one that people gravitate towards, or that they, like, it's kind of an earned thing, maybe. Yeah. Whereas, like, there are some characters that are, like, a lot more friendly to newcomers and will probably get picked a lot simply because people pick up the game for 100 hours or 10 hours or an hour and a half, and they sort of go, okay, well, I'll go with the one whose skills make fucking sense and don't involve me somehow having to control 6 different things and then deal with active items on top of that,
4 base damage increase to Meepo.
Yes, well. But yeah, so I don't know, that stuff is interesting, but I do think that you look at your roster, and if there's somebody that's not being picked because something's gone wrong with the character, or because maybe they've been out for a while and they don't get picked because everything you've added since then has been more interesting to play, or more fun, or more complex, or the other thing just doesn't fit with any of that anymore, or doesn't fit with team comps. Like, it's just this really weird thing of, like, having to keep the entirety of the game and all of its mechanics in mind as you design this thing, and I have no idea how you even start with that, like the flip charts and the mental gymnastics that you have to do to know that tweaking this thing over here will absolutely ruin one particular character in a very specific way. Like,
I think the answer to that with Dota is more that stuff tends to get its wings clipped, not on a kind of necessarily wholly reactionary basis, but mostly when there is a really degenerate system in play. Like, because that's the thing that ultimately undermines the sandbox. Like, if something is slightly overpowered, but to the way that it benefits the sandbox, then maybe it just needs tweaking. And I think that's happened a lot in this patch. I think there were characters that people expected to get dumpstered, in the words of the community, that haven't been, or at least haven't been to the extent that people expected. Or have, like, lost some power in the ways that were problematic previously, but gained some power as well. Like, and that's happened quite a lot. But there's one example of a character, Arc Warden, that was simply had a degenerate strategy for playing him that didn't use any of his interesting abilities in any complex, clever ways, was simply fucking shit to play against, shit to play, honestly. And so it's gone completely. And it's and the reason it's gone is because it precludes that character from being added to the pro scene, because it's shitty and degenerate, but also predominantly because it closes down options. And people were kind of raging about it because he got, like, people were like, this character's fucking dead, but he got huge buffs to one of his abilities, one that was never being used, in a way that makes the character more interesting. Right. But it's like, so he may even be overpowered now in some ways, or overpowered in particular circumstances, but that's fine relative to being simply boring. And that's the thing that's changed. And that's I think where the guiding light is like, is this creating interesting situations within the sandbox? And if it isn't, then that's when you change it up or down. But it's like, you know, if like, if no one's playing this character is bad, but so is people are only ever playing this character one way.
So the other thing that I would say, just in relation to the patch chat in general, like it's not thoughts about the current one, but I have a laptop that runs it's a MacBook. It runs a boot camped version of Windows, but it has an old version of Dota that I refuse to update because it sort of feels valuable to me in that it represents an older version of the game. It's an older patch. It's the Wraith Knight patch where there was kind of like a kind of Christmassy special event, essentially. But it's also, it's got all of these slight tweaks to items. Like there's an item that lets you instant teleport a tiny distance. But in the version that's on my laptop, it costs you a little bit of mana. And nowadays that cost doesn't exist. But I wish that there was some way that I could just archive all of these different iterations of this game. And like, I basically want a little Dota museum. I want a little League of Legends museum. I want an Eve museum. You know, like I wish that we had better ways of archiving this stuff, because you know, having spoken to some of the companies that have these long-running games, they don't even keep all of that stuff. You know, like they sort of concentrate on the now because the now is the business. But yeah, like it's that digital archiving side of things that fascinates me as well.
It does kind of exist for Dota.
Yeah.
Because of custom games. So it's possible to fully recreate a previous version of Dota within a custom game. It hasn't happened for a lot of them.
But not with the original source code, right?
You could make it indistinguishable.
But the point is that the code itself has value.
Okay, yeah, no, in that case, then no, exactly. But you could make a playable version.
Oh, yeah, you could, and I think that's also
6.79 era
like,
Dota or something.
that has value. But like, you know, I guess like what I would really love is to sort of try and play out the same game. You know, just get AI to play it out across so many different versions of Dota and just sort of see the different outcomes. Like, you know, I have no idea how possible that even would be, but just sort of have the same characters on each team and just play it out with all of the different costs and all of the different decisions involved and just sort of see how that even comes down. And I know that's really theoretical and it really isn't what the original question asked, but it's all these thoughts that I've been having about patch notes just because it seems to be patch notes like week.
I mean, like patch notes seems like the word patch seems to be a small word for what this actually is for these games. It's like it's a different phase of play for Dota, isn't it? When it's like a little Dota sequel, a parallel universe has been born.
It's like everything changes.
Yeah.
So it's
like they get called eras for a reason. Like, and it's interesting. Like, well, I say that. I mean, there are going to be. Oh boy, we're getting some complaint tweets on Friday, I'll tell you that for free.
We didn't talk about it in the bits before the questions.
Yeah, no, I'll put I'll put a timestamp like exactly this moment for people who've to return to the podcast.
Content warning.
But no, like, you know, this is a completely different side of game design that's, I think, really interesting. And it's interesting how big corporations approach it versus small teams versus individuals and so on. Yeah. Patch notes are fun, everybody.
Also, let me know if you have any old versions of games like that on your computer. I'd just be genuinely interested if anyone else is saving these things.
I guess Counter-Strike 1.6 is the ultimate example of that, where a particular version of a game gets frozen in time because the community decided that was the best one and people still play it. Like, you know, Source came along and then Go came along and people still play 1.6 for a reason. Yeah.
Well, because I was super interested in the Nostalrius conversations about World of Warcraft. Where people were like, you know, it has led to some really interesting conversations about the value of older experiences and what happens to that code and how you sort of make it relevant if it is still relevant and people still want to experience it. And it's just been really interesting sort of thinking about those things.
Yeah, it seems like the culture of video games isn't very good at protecting its past. And maybe that's a habit we can encourage somehow. I don't know what we can personally do on the podcast, but I mean, it's interesting to talk about.
The other thing, though, is that the internet is very good at preserving the past in a way that's never been possible.
Yeah.
And so...
Some. Like, I had that weird moment the other day when I remembered that I can't link to... so I worked for AOL for a while, and they shuttered the site that I'd worked on for 2 years. And that means that except for the things that I've saved to my hard drive on my current PC... that stuff doesn't exist anymore, and it's so weird, and it's, you know, like, some bits of it are probably on the Wayback Machine, but, like, it's sort of so ephemeral still, but also so persistent when you don't want it to be.
Yeah. I'm thinking specifically in the case of games, though, like, you know, if you go on Dota Buff, which is the main Dota stat tracking API website, you can filter that data so that you can look at literally every single game played in a given Dota patch ever that was logged online. So you if you want data from trends, like you want to see how a trend changed from patch to patch over all the years of that game's life, you can perfectly get that information. I'm
thinking more about the software itself. So, for example, the console generational cycle is very bad, especially when there's no backwards compatibility, because physical discs have an expiry date, like they'll last like 20 years, and then they'll start to degenerate. And that will all eventually be landfill. And the way of preserving it online is through emulation. And that's a sort of semi-illicit practice
and
that people do as a hobby.
As well,
and it's not like the source code is in it. It's living on a PC and running this stuff.
It's like the weird digital version of like how film used to just spontaneously combust, and you have to keep it in these like chilled chambers
things,
it's
like we don't even have our airtight chambers. It's just kind of a weird dark grey trade on the internet, and it feels like there should be a kind of museum that should exist that should archive this stuff.
Well, it's really interesting because the Museum of Modern Art, their architecture and what's it called, like not product design, but it's sort of design side of things, they are collecting video games, and that's been really interesting in sort of how they exhibit them when they do, and sort of, you know, what they do to express particular games, especially stuff like, because they collected Eve as well,
right?
And I think one of the things that they did was they worked with the community to create sort of day in the life kind of things, like resources that would sort of give a flavour of what a thing was like without sort of you having to play 150 hours and be part of a particular faction and sort of involve yourself in wars and things. And there's also things like Andrew Grain's book about, you know, the histories of the great empires of Eve, or I've forgotten the exact title, but and so there is sort of this interesting attempt to document these things, and there are other resources that have existed for years and years. It's like, it's not a new thing, but it's so piecemeal, and like the volume of digital data that sort of needs archiving, or, you know, people want to archive, is so huge that, you know, archivists and librarians and other sort of data collators can't keep up with it at all. Anyway, it's just this crazy morass of bytes and binary and all kinds of stuff that you want to store for some reason, but you can't, or, you know, it's sort of, it moves too fast or changes too fast. And so it's sort of, it's a really interesting challenge, but not one that there have been any sort of satisfactory answers for. Sorry if I just, so.
We're still on our first question.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
That went some interesting corners.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
It's enjoyable.
I have to keep pace. But yeah, no, it is interesting. The archive question is an entirely different question, but yeah, it is.
But still relevant to patches. Yay!
Sort of, yeah.
We're so good at this.
Things change is the answer.
And that's sad.
Yeah, but also happy. Human life.
Excellent.
Zed writes, I was reading a translated interview with the designer of Mega Man recently. Put a link in the show notes. In it, he said that in the old days, if your game didn't have any secrets, it was difficult to get it featured on various gaming magazines. So what are the panel's favourite secrets in games? And certainly, I love being referred to as a panel.
Yeah, I do like that.
Like the jury.
What do they mean, secrets?
Like, and which ones seemed like obligatory nonsense for completionists? Bonus question. can the panel think of guidelines for developers in hiding stuff in games to make it fun to look for? Like
Did
genuine.
they mean like how official N64 magazine would have like the locations of all of the particular this, that, and the other?
Well, there are genuine
game,
secrets in games, like levels and stuff that there's no signposting for that you have to find through some kind of crazy input.
I think we should return to an era where we demand developer secrets, more secrets from games. And when they come in, we should go, what are your secrets? What are your special secrets that we can use to sell our magazines? Let's go back to that
People
time.
do that kind of thing, like Easter eggs and stuff. Prime YouTube fodder.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But also data mining. People kind of find out the secrets in advance.
That's
like,
true.
They're just
Yeah.
kind of like, well, this
terrifying.
thing. So you have to give things like weird code names. And then I don't know like how that works in regard to like the Easter egg. Does that become an Easter egg of an Easter egg? Like, are these Russian doll Easter eggs?
There are some interesting examples of this working recently. Like Arkham City had Calendar Man in it and people didn't really realise. Which was a Batman villain in a basement in a police cell. Who was programmed, and I think there were like hidden patches and stuff so that he would talk about stuff when dates were reached, like dates on your system clock.
Yeah.
That eventually led to him directly kind of presaging things from Arkham Knight before that game was announced and that kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
So,
Nice.
like, that, I think actually Rocksteady would be a really good example of a modern developer that did a really good job of hiding loads of Easter eggs in games that didn't necessarily become apparent straight away and resisted data mining. That kind
But I guess there's also like, it sort of forms part of a game's viral appeal in a different way, like with PT. Like, that was an entire community of people desperately trying to work out the actual reliable way of getting to the end of this chain of events and, like, how you even, like, do you have to scream into the microphone on a Tuesday or, like...
Yeah, it's almost that. I was at a colleague Phil Savage's house with Sam, and we had a giant crate of cider, and Sam just
Was
loves...
this your Black Dragon
It's
weekend?
the Black Dragon weekend, the Lost weekend. And so we drank a lot of that, and Sam loves PT. He knows it inside out. He knows every kind of trick you have to do. He knows when to look at the floor. He spent most of the time looking at the floor in the game, just going around these corridors, because that's the way you avoid the ghost. You just stare at your feet. There's a bit where you have to, like a phone rings, you walk 5 steps, and then someone has to say, Jareth, into the microphone, which has to be plugged into the system, and then it will progress to the ending. But I was so drunk and I was on microphone duty, so I was just going Jareth, Jareth, Jareth for like 20 minutes, just throwing it out there.
I guess that really kind of spoils the spookiness.
yeah. It was hilarious.
Ruin the mood.
in our state of stupor, it was amazing. But yeah, that entire game is a good example actually of a kind of one big secret. And you didn't even know what it was, and then at the end, if you did all these obscure things, once the internet cracked it, it was, oh my god, a Silent Hills game that will never be made. Hooray!
Yeah. But like, so yeah, that stuff definitely still exists and is
definitely
happening. I guess it just sort of adapts, and like it has to sort of be built to either withstand the onslaught of an entire Reddit community or to sort of exist independently of it, maybe. Because, like, if you've got that many people or that, that sort of dedicated data mining or that kind of, sort of obsessive trial and error or, experimentation, then, these things get cracked in, like, minutes or, seconds or, days at the most. So, yeah, like... Certainly not enough time for a magazine cycle, I guess.
not anymore.
But what was the last thing you guys wrote that was like that ilk?
Like a tips guide.
Yeah, like for the
do it,
magazine.
really.
No, it's not really useful. We used to have like a how-to section in the mag,
Yeah.
but that would be like how to build a Quake level in 20 steps. But it wouldn't really... Articles about secrets never really seem pointless now, don't they?
Yeah.
I guess
That's the point.
online maybe more so.
Yeah, certainly. But that is because
because of
that
the
side of
time
online,
scale.
Yeah, it works really well online, especially if there's like a video and there's something to look at. That goes down very well.
Yeah, like a quirky thing or
Yeah, it's like when
a GIF.
there's like a small Dark Souls nod in Just Cause 3.
Yeah.
And just be able to see them. It's like it's a bonfire that you can find in that world, but it's like a machine gun instead of a sword stuck into the bonfire. And it's like, huh. But,
things that make you go, huh.
That's the internet, really.
Yeah.
People love that shit.
Yeah.
And that did very well.
29 things from games that make you go, huh. That's how you website. Magazines still have dignity, he said, as a man who now works fully online.
Sometimes you stroke magazines, you walk past them in W.H. Smith's and run a hand longingly on them.
Yeah, we charge you for that nowadays.
No, that's right.
It's not a library. Stop fondling the books.
Exactly. Speaking of something along those lines, I guess, maybe, Ken writes, Dark Souls 3 seemingly being the last Dark Souls, what would you like next from Software? Cyber Souls, Armored Core, Other?
Ooh.
I would play more Dark Souls.
You said last time you were on this, you said you were done.
I'm not done. There's no way I'm done. Because I'm towards the end of Dark Souls 3 now. So since I was last on here, I'm on pretty much probably close to the final boss. And I've stopped playing it. Because it's like finishing a good book. Like, when you don't want to finish it. So I've been procrastinating and putting off the final couple of bosses. Or the final bit, the final area. Because I'm like, once that happens, there won't be any more Dark Souls. And the solution to my problem is more Dark Souls. And if they released a game of that caliber that is just Dark Souls every year, I think it would take me a lot of years to get bored of it, frankly.
Okay, fine.
I really like the formula.
You could do like how Owen Hill did and do like a Twine game of Dark Souls, or of you playing Dark Souls and like supposed to be hanging out with some friends but not in the end.
I don't think Owen ever released that, did he?
No, I don't think he
Otherwise
did.
it seemed very hard to explain.
I thought you guys had mentioned it on the podcast before. Have I just broken an embargo?
The friend DA. No, maybe Owen did. I don't remember. But, I mean, we actually have a question later on about the futility of trying to recreate a game for yourself that you love.
That's true, yeah.
I think
I really love that.
No, it's great. But
should I not have mentioned it?
No, not at all. It's just that it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of Tom wanting more Dark Souls forever.
Well, I've actually want more Bloodborne.
Okay.
I'll change my
your mind.
So Bloodborne 2, the electric boogaloo, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well,
This town's not finished.
I want another Bloodborne expansion. I think is what I really want. Because the first expansion is fucking amazing. I don't know Dark Souls in the future. I don't know. I think I'd like to see Miyazaki create a different formula for a different type of game. And tell a different type
You don't
of
mean
story.
that.
I think his lieutenants could take over.
Maybe if he did a seafaring pirate game.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
How good would that be?
That would be, I would try and play that
And like
then give up and then watch Chris
Bark
play it.
Souls.
Nice.
Q.
The pirates can be, the invaders could be other players, and they could be pirates.
Dark Sails.
Yeah, like you sometimes get boarded.
That's a better name than the first one that came up.
You get boarded by these, with a cutlass, and you can choose to be like you with your semi-naked, man aboard the boat,
Yes.
man on deck.
Sure. And in the game. It's obligatory.
Whereas I'd be a fully clothed buccaneer, with a
Dark Sails, everybody.
Dark Sails.
Oh, nice.
That was good. That's good. That's money, Miyazaki.
Yeah.
That's
Print it.
Someone will buy that.
Yeah.
I will buy that.
Yeah.
Us, we will buy that. The panel will buy that.
Panel has decided. Good.
K. Beloved of God Helmet writes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's
Video
Dark Souls
game,
character.
video space game, as in with a character break, not word space, or video hyphen game. Please show you're working. It's
word.
video game, one word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one word.
That's true.
Yeah, anyone who says otherwise is wrong.
Consensus from the panel. Good, nice
The
one.
panel has
The panel
judged.
has adjudicated.
2 words are cumbersome, hyphens are ugly. It's
Yeah.
one word.
Yeah.
Whack it together.
Video James, if you must.
Yeah, sure. Computer games. I quite like computer games with the space because it sounds really archaic.
Yeah. That's pretty old school.
Yeah, it's got a bit of an ironic flair. to it.
E-games.
Yeah, e-games. God knows. God knows this industry is all about ironic flair. So, Pierre writes, if you could try any weird video game food, what would it be?
I love this question. I think it's one of the best questions we've had on the Quentin Crowbar.
And a birthday cake.
I would eat this question. It's because it's something I've definitely wanted to eat loads of stuff in games.
I think we've spoken about this before, haven't we?
We have.
Because our answer to this isn't food, it's loot.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
I want to put everything from Diablo in my mouth.
Yes. All the little
monsters, the characters, the loot, the
kind
levels.
Of, the kind of crimson globules that come out of enemies in Devil May Cry. I want to slurp them all up.
I think anything that looks juicy or like it might be sweets.
Yeah. I want a big VR straw for the 5.
Yeah.
You got a paddle in each hand. You're just gobbling up collectibles
drink your milkshake.
like a crazy Pac-Man.
Yeah. That'd be great. I think, Destiny's engrams are the most delicious looking.
Which one, though? Which one do you think would be the nicest?
Blueberry, strawberry.
No, that would be raspberry,
lemon.
though, wouldn't it? Following the conventions of children's ice creams. Blue is raspberry flavour.
Is it?
Yeah.
That was blueberry.
I edited a book on this subject.
Really?
Yeah. I edited a book about food, weird food. And in one section, it's about, like, the blue being raspberries, but another one is about, like, how banana transportation works. And why are you looking at me like this? It was a thing that I did.
I believe the answer is that as obvious. I fully believe this happened because you used to write law for socks.
Yeah, that was another thing that happened.
Dark socks.
Yeah. I've had some odd jobs. Yeah. But, yeah, no, blue is raspberries.
Okay, fine.
Right.
Yeah.
But I still want to put them M-grams in my mouth.
I really want to lick them. I think they'll taste... I think they'll taste like amazing lollipop. I don't know.
Do you think they taste like Jolly Ranchers or something?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
What
What else do I want to put in my mouth? None of this is food. Like, I don't really give a shit about, like, I don't eat, candy floss from a bin or anything. Most, like, World of Warcraft armor, I would definitely try and eat.
You'd try and eat.
It's pretty chunky. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is actually.
Yeah.
That's like a steak dinner, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think anything that looks luxurious, like any fabrics, I sort of want to touch them or like lick them or like
to drape them over your face and then
yeah,
feel
like
really
anything,
soft.
particularly anything that looks velvety. I sort of just want to touch it.
Final Fantasy 15 has amazing looking food in it, like actual food that you cook.
Okay.
Oh, really?
It's almost photorealistic. Like eggs and beans and other foodstuffs.
Imagine eating a fondant Mario Kart.
So, in a recent edition
I just imagine it would taste like fondant.
The shells, I want to eat those.
Sorry,
Shells.
Pip, go on.
Sorry.
No, that sounds fine. That's probably better than what I was going to say. But in a recent issue of Creative Review, they had a photo shoot that basically involved the planets of the solar system that were made out of food stuff. So they had these jelly-filled Plutos, or like these, like something had matcha green tea ice cream kind of thing, and sort of it was sprayed on the outside with chocolate, and they looked amazing, and like not in that kind of weird, oh, it's got loads of preservatives or weird hairspray on it because food photography way, but like the way that they'd presented it in the magazine just seemed to be, it's food. And I was just like, ooh, very attractive food.
Wow.
I kept that. I do keep attractive looking food pictures.
Just in case.
Yeah. I've got Pinterests dedicated to this. The piñata cake was pretty great. Yeah. It's just a cake like a piñata that actually is full of sweets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
You need to link me to this.
Yeah.
I need to know. I would eat everything and everyone in all of Mario's games.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Because it all looks kind of like it's made of sugar.
That's what I'm saying.
It's like a Candyland, isn't it?
It is like a
top of a
Candyland.
cake. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
some of the levels in Mario Party were actually on top of a cake. So, But you imagine, like, what would a Goomba taste like? That would be like a little jelly baby thing,
Toffee.
wouldn't it? Or like a...
Clearly toffee.
I don't know, they feel squishy to me, or look squishy. Like, kind of more marshmallowy.
Squishy toffee.
Like a kind of, like, dolly mixtures. Those,
Fudge.
the... Oh.
Yeah.
Nothing like a delicious fudge Goomba.
Like, what are the dudes that throw hammers on clouds? Is it-
Does it begin with a K?
Shit. Hammer Bros? I think they might actually
Hammer Bros,
Hammer Bros, yeah.
Yeah. The hammers aren't edible.
Lucky too.
Lucky to, yeah.
But I'd eat their little clouds. Then they'd be sad.
They would be.
Yeah, where do you live now,
flossy.
hammer prick?
They would candy floss. Just anything as long as it's not a marshmallow. I mean, a meringue. Really not on board with
I
the
love
meringue.
I think our listeners should contact us with their own personal kind of...
Or send us baked
What do you
goods.
think Toad tastes like?
yeah.
There's definitely like a fanfiction.net subsection we're wandering into here.
Yeah, if you were to assemble various Mario characters into a dish that a giant would eat, what Mario characters would you assemble and why?
Have you seen that game Giant
None
Cop?
of it is...
Giant cop?
Where the VR game where you're a huge cop.
No, it sounds
And
good.
you have to you're just a massive a Godzilla-sized cop in a city. And you have to lean down and throw people into the crime bucket.
Wow. It's like,
that's
look at all this tiny crime, I've got to fix this.
Yeah, it's great, but that's a step away from being like, but what if I could eat the crime?
Oh yeah, like a BFG simulator when you play one of the bad giants.
What do you think would be the most delicious crime?
Most delicious crime.
Do you mean to eat as the cop?
Well, if you are having to eat ne'er-do-wells and, consume their misdeeds, presumably you've got an idea that they might be flavoured, because otherwise, you'd have murders that tasted like salt licorice,
Yeah, I don't think murder.
Because Sweden is the home of the murder.
Yeah.
Obviously.
A smorgasbord of murder. Literally the only correct use of that phrase.
Yeah. Somewhere Graham is nodding in an accepting way. He loves that word.
Yeah. Maybe not fraud. I think fraud.
Delicious fraud.
I think fraud would be bitter.
Do you think that robbery, like a jewellery heist, that would probably be delicious?
Tasty heist.
It'd be fizzy. I think it'd be
Fizzy heist, yeah, like a fizzy
heist.
diamondy heist.
Yeah. Like a lemonade kind of.
Yeah.
Tang.
Yeah. Like a fizzy cola bottle sweets from Haribo.
Do you think a mugging would be kind of quite warm?
No, that'd be a bit gross, I think.
Chocolatey.
No.
Sickly.
Yeah.
Good.
I want to eat tiny people now.
Yeah.
Okay, this was not the question.
Jelly babies are the thing for you.
They are. Tomorrow I shall buy many of them. Pretend to police them all in a tiny realm, then eat them one by one.
Guilty of the crime of perjury. Tasty blueberry
tiny
perjury.
Pink baby jelly baby, I will now eat you for your crimes against society.
That's me this weekend.
You should prosecute each and every one of them by eating them.
With
this isn't justice, they scream.
That's why you have to eat them head first, so they can't lodge an appeal.
Due process, gotta follow it.
Due process is what happens about 6 to 8 hours later.
It's not my fault, I didn't write the rules.
Wow, we've gone to some weird...
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you tuned out during the extensive League of Legends Dota patch chat and you're missing this?
It's been a strange one, I have to say.
Yeah, we're nowhere near finished. Because we literally
More questions to go.
4 hours on the first 3 questions.
Sorry.
No need to apologise. They know what they're getting into. Or they know what they're free to stop listening to.
Yeah, that's true.
Mike from Brisbane writes...
Hi, Mike.
That's not how he writes.
Oh.
That'd be weird.
I'm just saying hi.
Okay, that's friendly.
Carry on.
He writes, "Hi, Crazy Crow Bar," which I think is an actual place.
Oh.
The Crazy Crow Bar, maybe. There was a link. I wasn't sure what was going on. Thanks for the very interesting discussion in episode 137 about difficulty and accessibility.
Oh, I was pleased.
I know.
Sorry, I was
I can
voicing
tell.
my pleasure.
Yeah. There's been a lot of interesting words on the internet lately on these subjects, especially Adam Smith's article about the worth of an easy mode in Dark Souls 3 and some of the reaction to this, both on the comments and at other interesting sites. Like Rob
Shit, I haven't read that. It's on my RPS.
Matt Lees also had an interesting aside about this in his latest vid on Bloodborne narrative, in which he opined that difficulty and struggle were a necessary part of the narrative, which was, I guess, my same argument, but earlier in the pod, on a different pod. I'm currently struggling through the dungeons of Irithyll, and Plane certainly feels integral to what they were trying to do. Love/hate every second of it. Anyway, I was listening to that part of the episode at a cafe, and there were a couple at the next table, one of whom was in a wheelchair and signing to the other, who had a serious-looking hearing aid. 2 thoughts occurred to me. One was that I've seen a number of games in the last couple of years that go well past the scenery-chewing detections of mental illness, such as Vast in Far Cry 3 is the example he gives, to treat the subject a bit more thoughtfully and or maturely, not just games like Depression Quest or Hellblade, but also the likes of Darkest Dungeon. However, I haven't seen any games that address similar themes in regard to physical disability. Have you seen any? Should we expect any? My second thought was that VR would be a natural fit with a main character in a wheelchair, and I hope that somebody's already on that, thoughtfully, obviously. Who else wants to play a wisecracking detective in a wheelchair? Would this trivialise the issue for those who don't have a choice but to be in a wheelchair, or help others to understand the everyday frustrations? Both, probably, he puts in brackets. Also, finally, pip pip hooray.
Aww.
Thanks for oculating, everybody. Mike from Brisbane.
Aww. So, with regard to physical disability in games, I was interested with what they did with Beyond Eyes, which was a game about a little girl who's looking for her cat, and the entire landscape is kind of governed by what you can hear because the little girl herself, like the character, is blind. And so like you'll have little moments where you go over to a thing where you can hear running water, and originally it will sort of show itself to you, or early on as you approach, it will show itself to you as a kind of stream, I think. But then as you get closer, and presumably she can actually smell it or sort of hear it a bit better and all of that side of things, it transforms into like a sewer grate and stuff like that. So you actually sort of get this sensation of like it's an interesting manifestation of how that world would theoretically be, I guess. And so it's interesting. Like the game itself I didn't find particularly interesting and didn't really get very far with before I sort of dropped off, but like the ideas certainly were far more interesting than, for example, just not having any visuals and relying entirely on in-game sound. You know, it was an interesting, different treatment.
Yeah, there have been. It seems like blindness is one that's been touched on quite a few times. I think there is a free game, and in my head it has monks in the title for some reason, but you do navigate it entirely through sound, and it's supposed to be a kind of unsettling experience. I can't remember. It came up many years ago.
There's been a few like that actually, and I think there were a few on tablet quite recently. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember any names. Like none of the names are sort of springing to mind, but I've written a few things about them, or sort of, you know, they've come up in research for other articles. But yeah, like I think the point about the VR stuff is interesting because it's sort of like about whether, or I guess I read it as about whether you can use virtual reality to sort of encourage empathy almost, you know, because there's some interesting art projects, I think, which happen with the dev kit rifts, where you would sort of experience what it was like in another person's body because of different sort of perspectives and things like that. And so that was kind of interesting because it sort of focused on, you know, different genders or different abilities or different, you know, so it's that stuff is being done, which is interesting. So yeah, I guess it's sort of about empathy and about sort of actually listening to people whose experiences they are, rather than sort of what you assume them to be. And also, you know, if they're making games themselves, you know, sort of trusting that they're expressing either something about that experience or, you know, making something completely different if that's what they fancy. But yeah, like it's, I guess empathy is the main thing in all of this.
Yeah, you don't see, like, video games transgress this quite often. So there's a horror game coming up where you play a blind character who taps their cane on the floor, and then they get like a sonar bounce back of the sound of the cane, which is, it's like, I assume it's not what it's like to be blind at all. It's just to kind of turn this disability into a game mechanic. But it is what it's
like to be a bat.
Or a dolphin.
Yeah, a giant bat simulator.
Or a plane.
Or Daredevil.
Or Daredevil, yeah. What I actually really like about the Daredevil Netflix series is that they've stayed away from doing visualizations of what his sensory experience is like. There's literally only one scene where they do it, and that's where he sees the face of the woman he fancies in the first season. It's like half a second, but it stays away from what that dreadful Daredevil film
she's made
did.
of fire.
She's made of, it's just really quite strange. But they've deliberately gone away from the Daredevil film, where everything is, again, like in Bat, like echoes and shimmers and things like this, which seems like a really reductive kind of way of displaying that experience.
I guess it's kind of like, it's a way of... I guess trying to translate it in a way that you still have a thing on the screen, or like it's kind of like, oh, let's approximate this in a ham-fisted way. But like, that's why I was so interested in what the Beyond Eyes stuff was doing, because it felt more like an interesting, or a kind of a non-stereotypical way of dealing with those ideas, and sort of it actually sort of made me think slightly differently about the character and her experience, as well as, you know,
it's a good sign. I mean, I think we'll get more of this sort of stuff, and it will get more and more thoughtful as people kind of dig into these issues.
I guess the flip side of it is that the other side of this question is that the notion of a character in a wheelchair solves a problem for VR, which is the problem VR has is legs. And the problem VR has is the fact that the person playing is most often going to be sat in a chair. And figuring out how to simulate walking is actually really, really difficult in VR, because your interaction with the world is through your hands. So a wheelchair is almost a convenient shortcut, because that's a way of achieving movement through a world that uses your hands rather than your legs, and it takes advantage of a seated posture, which is sort of nice in a way, because it makes it very natural to start telling stories about people who happen to experience the world through a wheelchair.
Yeah.
It would be nice if that's what actually happened, but then I guess there's the danger of it just being, that's the conceit that helps us tell this story, and we'll just sort of like pay lip service to, like, you know, you can imagine it basically being like, well, there's the conceit, that's what makes it easier for VR. Now let's just airbrush away all of the difficulties that are associated, or the experiences associated, and you know, you sort of end up with this thing that's just like so clearly a convenience thing rather than any meaningful. But I don't know.
I would be interested to find out if actually you didn't have to do very much to suddenly create that sense of empathy you were talking about.
Yeah,
that simply necessarily the sense of being in a room surrounded by people who were standing when you have to sit.
Or simply
be interesting.
Be confronted by stairs and things like this, and just would make you instantly think about disabled access in spaces in a very different way if you actually have to sit down in that chair.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the alternative to this is that they make games about people in like hover wheelchairs that do magic things.
That will also happen.
Yeah.
But then I suppose you get a spectrum of responses to...
Yeah, for sure.
So some of it will be insensitive, and hopefully some of it will be interesting.
Yeah.
Alexander writes, "Hello, CNC crew."
Hello.
Hi.
One thing that makes Half-Life 2 such a favourite to me in particular is how perfectly they nailed the difficulty. I'm no slouch in first-person shooters, he does say so himself, and any multiplayer shooters I spend a few hours with will see me landing in the top 20%, if not better, on scoreboards. Despite this, multiple playthroughs of HL2 have never made it easier. I will reliably get knocked down to the single digits of health at certain points every time I play, but I'm able to pull through without dying by staying focused. Then I have a tense climb through the next several areas as I slowly build my health back up. Not dying is key because I remain immersed and don't spend time reloading, but it's also not something I can carelessly breeze through. So my question, are there any games that you think you love much more than you otherwise would for striking a sweet spot with difficulty? And he also goes on to write a little bit about, in response to a question that Pip sent into the podcast like 13 episodes ago, which was about weather in games, and he highlights both The Division's blizzards and The Witcher 3's storms, which are apparently amazing as well.
Ooh.
So, cool suggestions.
Okay, cool, thank you.
But yes, to the question, difficulty, sweet spots. Those sweet, sweet spots.
It's interesting to note with Valve that they went on to try and, with the AI director in Left 4 Dead, actually create an AI that would put you in that sweet spot and keep you there by varying the level of threat from enemies and varying the placement of health packs and weapons and that sort of thing, deliberately to keep you in a certain type of mental space, which I thought was an absolutely fascinating idea, and one I've not seen. That you see adaptive difficulties all over the place, but not to such a rigorous degree, not to the extent where every enemy and all of the items are rearranged in order to create a certain experience.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting one. I'm not sure I totally agree that Half-Life 2 has I do think it's an amazing difficulty curve, but I do think it's a game that gets easier with experience and practice. But it maybe curiously good at recreating a certain sense of threat and so on, by the way it mitigates your access to materials and weapons and so on.
I think there's a really good balance
I'm wrong.
I think enemies deal exactly the right, like a really good amount of damage in that game. Like getting hit is not fatal, but is always serious. And a lot of games don't really get that, or they're trying to go for a different experience where you are a Superman, but in Half-Life you're very much not, which is part of its difficulty. But yeah, I'm not sure. The first time I played it was like that, but I think when I've played it again and again, it's gotten a bit simpler. But
yeah, that said though, it has retained a lot of its magic. I would certainly agree that it retains a lot.
I agree. I think that's down to AI. I think it's down. I've said it before on the pod that AI, especially in shooters, has not really come along from Half-Life 2.
No,
and still to this day.
I think a game that maybe this is a sort of different thing because it's not through a system or through a dynamic thing like AI, but I think Blizzard's work on the StarCraft single player stuff, like they did a really good job, I think, with that game on multiple difficulty levels of really setting it right. And it's the kind of thing you used to go to Blizzard for, which is like they got where this should be, where like you can play through any of those campaigns. There's a long RTS campaign, the StarCraft 2 trilogy, and they're always like, I remember I played through all of them on normal and hard, I think, and that first time through, you're always succeeding, but you never feel like you're coasting, but you're also not failing, so you're not doing that annoying RTS thing of like having to rebuild your base from scratch or completely try again, which is the thing that Command & Conquer used to fall down with all the time, where it'd be like, oh, I started this mission wrong, so I'm just going to lose 20 minutes in, 25 minutes in. They did a lot of work that was probably underappreciated because there were no other RTSs left to compare it to by the time StarCraft 2 was coming to a close, but did a lot of work to solve that problem of not allowing you to fuck up too much early, and that is possible on the harder difficulty levels, but if you play as it's intended, I think you get a really good fun experience that doesn't feel trivial, which
they're really good at creating in StarCraft campaigns, particularly. They're really good at creating tiers of victory. So there's always that sense you get like is it a medal system? I can't remember what it was. Like
there are optional objectives, and they often give you resources that you use to unlock unit variants. In the metagame thing, and
that's really effective. The way they balance that is really effective. So if I finish a mission, I kind of scrape through and I have a good experience because I've won and there's been challenge, but I feel as though I could improve and actually get those extra things. And, yeah, it works really well. The other way, Blizzard are also very good with 003. There's the final difficulty tier is split up into I think like 10, or maybe now it's more 12 top tier difficulty levels, which are I think they're Torment, and so you graduate gradually from Torment 1 to Torment 2, and a lot of the big decision making as you're going through that path is whether you go up a difficulty level and what level of challenge you find acceptable compared to the speed at which you can move through areas in order to gather loot. And it's a very key game mechanic in the endgame progression of Diablo 3 that works very, very well. Yeah,
it works extremely well. Like, that's not so much about them kind of having gotten it perfect before you even arrived, but just about allowing you to figure out what it is actually fun.
Yeah, precisely. And it's all about finding your own comfort zone. And then if you get too comfortable, you start to think, well, I could get more shit for actually challenging myself. And that's an interesting decision that you have to make as to when you actually skip up that tier. And I can't think of any other games that really do that. So, yeah, good job, Blizzard. Good at making games.
Still good at making games, turns out.
Absolutely.
Although the people from the comments thread from the Eye of Terror, they would say otherwise.
No.
That's true. Jan writes, Aloha, smiley face. Your latest podcast started with the news about Titanfall 2 trailer. You talked about how that is a great game ruined by some stupid decisions, and I immediately thought of Rainbow Six Siege. You later mentioned that one as well, but not that it is plagued by some of the same stupid decisions. I'm about as interested in adversarial game modes as you were in that trailer for Titanfall 2, so I'm talking only about the co-op modes as I never played anything else in the open beta and the free-to-play weekend. The game itself was actually fun, apart from the bullshit suicide bombers. Nevertheless, none of us will buy it. You can't even choose the game mode you're playing, let alone the mission. It alternates between the 4 modes: bomb defusal, save hostage, defend hostage, and terrorist hunt on random levels. In over 6 hours, I played the house level I know from the beta just once. Of course, you can't just change the number of enemies for terrorist hunt as you could since every Rainbow Six ever. Add to that the, at least for co-op, stupid unlock system that forces everyone to play for a few hours, then you can unlock characters and gear without being able to test them first, and the gear needs to be unlocked on every other character again. The co-op was clearly an afterthought in a game focused on PvP, but it hurts to see the great potential that's already there go to waste, especially as they waited since Raven Shield for this, and the destruction tech and sound in the game is so good. It's already baffling how such a simple feature as choosing the level or game mode you want to play could be missed, but I guess that was a conscious decision and not an oversight, and I just can't understand why one would ever think this would be a good idea. To finally get to the question, are there any other games that were ruined for you by this form of take-it-or-leave-it design that could have been averted by a simple option in a menu somewhere? Do you think we'll see more of this as more and more developers and publishers want to control the whole experience and their players? Thanks for reading my rant, and of course all the lovely podcasts. Jan. So, my view on this is that I actually prefer there to be more focused games, and I think in the Rainbow Six's sense it's unfortunate because they probably felt a pressure to include Terrorist Hunt because it was a popular mode from a previous game, but I think he's probably right that it wasn't the focus of what the game was going to be, because it was going to be a multiplayer game. Before that, it was probably going to be Rainbow Six Patriots, which is the interesting thing, that it was previously going to be a single player game, and then it was a multiplayer game. And so maybe, and it's a tricky question where it's like, do they half-ass the mode and disappoint people who only want to play that? Or do they not include it at all and just say, we are making a multiplayer Rainbow Six game, if you don't want that, don't play it?
Yeah, I think that including a half-ass mode is really unfortunate for people who buy into a game because of that mode and don't care about the other thing. And also, it's so easy now to add a mode later, further down the line, either as DLC or some sort of update, where if you still want this to be part of the experience, do it properly and then add it later. And that's more of an option for developers these days. So that would maybe be a better compromise. But yeah,
like the absence of pick what map and mode you want to play stuff that's just flat out.
Yeah, that sucks.
Like
that really sucks.
That sucks. But on principle, I'm in favour of games. Like, I think, Pip, I think you might have something to say about this about another recent game, but like, I think the death of the traditional MMO, one of the ideas that's going away is the idea that a game has to contain every single experience. That you need your PvP and your PvE and your co-op and your competitive stuff.
The Omni game.
Yeah, whereas, the MMO died and in its place rose MOBAs and big sprawling single player RPGs and games and hub-based PvE games like The Division and Destiny and so on.
Yeah, we've seen lots of kind of vestigial multiplayer modes. Back in the day, added stuff like Bioshock 2, remember? That had a very strange multiplayer mode.
It did have a really strange multiplayer mode.
Tacked onto it, and that was a weird period where it just felt like it had to be on the box, and that's not a reason to add a mode.
And similarly, Blizzard, we'll probably never know the exact story of what happened, but Titan died. Like, they never made Titan work. They spent 7 years trying to make what by all accounts was probably going to be a shooter MMO. It didn't work. And they built Overwatch from the ashes of that game and its assets and probably its world. Yeah. And they made a very focused competitive-only game that is now set to be very successful and is very good, but only by focusing and just going this, maybe there's a parallel universe where Titan comes out and it's also called Overwatch and it's like this big flabby PvE MMO, but everyone thinks the PvP is great, but two people are too busy grinding their Winston points in, New Egypt to play the really excellent multiplayer mode. Like, no, it's bleh, is my noise.
Yeah, like the game that I've played recently that does that jack of all trades thing that just sort of seems to be setting out as maybe a time land grab, if that makes sense, like, is Battleborn. And because I played it at a preview event and then I played it on the free weekend that it had recently, and like, part of it I think is that I just don't get on with the game's sense of humour. It has a very sort of Gearbox sense of humour and I bounce off that quite hard anyway. But the actual sort of the meat of it is this co-op based sort of story mode where you're, you know, fulfilling particular objectives as a team of different heroes, and you can, you know, there's a sort of persistent leveling up thing that you can do to unlock other heroes that you can play as, and blah 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 blah. But you can also take those heroes into these like multiplayer things, and one of them's a lane pushing sort of MOBA-esque thing where you're trying to destroy sentry turrets and things. And I have spent time with the game. I've tried to like figure it out, but I haven't got any sense of any of these modes being the thing, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's not quite what the person who wrote in with the question was talking about, but it is still this thing of like the lack of focus and the knock-on effect of that. And it just feels like they made this co-op game, or from what I've played, rather, it feels like they've made this sort of co-op sort of shootery hero team thing, put a story on it, but also sort of just want to monopolize the time when you might drop out and do other things by having a MOBA thing and by having these other sort of competitive things. So you wouldn't leave. But for me, the experience of that is I wouldn't stay. Like, I haven't found the hook. And speaking to I think it's Randy Varnell, the executive producer, I want to say. You know, he was sort of saying that the point of it for him, I think, is the characters, and that you just sort of take them and you play them in these other modes, and you sort of figure out what they can do, and you get attached to them, and you know, you do all of this stuff. But I just sort of didn't feel true when I played it, you know. I was kind of like, well, I'm not developing an affinity for them because I'm not enjoying any of the modes that I play them in, I guess.
Right.
So I don't really know whether other people have had that experience, but yeah, it was that jack of all trades, master of none thing that feels like this person's experience with the co-op.
It's I mean, it's the opposite problem in that Rainbow Six has a very clear primary mode.
No, but what I'm saying is it feels like the entire game is their experience with the co-op mode. Is like none of it was quite the focus, none of it was quite the priority. Which
I think is maybe ultimately that amounts to the counter argument, which is what happens when developers, like occasionally a developer gets it all right. And that's the extraordinary thing.
Like even Mass Effect 3 had a decent...
Yeah, Mass Effect 3 is a good example of like, why is that multiplayer so good? No one knows, it just really was. Yeah, because people there were riots in the street when they announced they were going to do multiplayer in that game, and then
it made no sense to do it.
Yeah,
you know, if they did it and it was right.
But that's the exception, right?
Yeah, very much the exception. Very much.
And Dota's story mode in the.
That's a tutorial, so yeah, tutorial they've backed off from since actually. But you know, you mentioned Left 4 Dead earlier. That's a good example here.
I meant Warcraft.
Where? Oh, the story mode in Dota 1, as in
it
Warcraft 3.
Was a bant.
I now get it. I'm sorry. They actually did do a single player story based tutorial for Dota 2.
Yeah,
so.
with but
yeah.
Oh, my bant just drowned.
The bant went awry.
It drifted out to sea, and then not waving but drowning.
It hit the target though. You should say bant received, just to confirm these things.
Bant knowledged. God, what? Why? Left 4 Dead was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
As a game, it's not a good single player game. It's all right, not brilliant. It's kind of, you can play it, it's okay, but that game is designed for co-op, and
apparently it's really good in Versus. I never got into Versus, but
Versus
there's a really dedicated community of Versus players for Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, well, Versus Left 4 Dead is why Evolve happened. And then Evolve went away again.
Yes.
I feel like maybe is it Mass Effect 2 with the planetary mining game? I feel like they really should have focused on the planetary mining game. That was amazing.
There wasn't. It was
that
just
Mass Effect 1? Was that Mass Effect 2?
I think it might have been Mass Effect 1 actually, but you know, I just loved
one didn't
those
have
planets for resources.
Those two had the scanning the planets with thumbstick vibration.
Yeah,
I played a lot of that actually.
Yeah. See, they should have focused in on that. I mean, you know, what was all this story nonsense happening off to the side?
Yeah, it's a good case study in like why minigames are often shit as well because you're making a smaller game within your game that isn't as good as your game.
The Oblivion face grimace detection conversation system of joy.
This is often like this is what we were doing earlier, Pip. You there's a little joke, and then you immediately insult the person, then threaten them, and then compliment them.
Oh yeah, did I get it right?
Yeah,
did I get my horse or sweets?
I will literally,
or whatever it is?
I will fucking sell you a cheap mango now.
Yes. 80 pence.
Yeah, and you can just take stuff from my house now, like 50% of the possessions.
Okay, that's called a divorce, but sure.
I didn't realise that, because it's the thing, if you get above a certain popularity threshold in Oblivion, you can take like 50% of a person's things.
The most happy you could be is divorce by that metric in Oblivion.
Well, that's what happens if you build a relationship on a foundation of alternately complimenting, threatening, making a joke, and then threatening them again.
Yeah, half their cheese wheels, yours.
By rotating a little wheel around, seeing what their face does. That's the best.
What an amazing system.
That's the best system.
Such fun memories.
People go, joke?
She
didn't really smile. Compliment? No. Threat?
Oh.
She's into there we go.
No, that made it sound weird. Like, I thought I'd say yes to the third thing that you'd said, because I quite like threes at the moment,
also,
then no, that's just gone weird places.
It's because the facial animation was so bad in that game as well. Like, a look of fear, which is this contorted mess of vague, like, mush. It was like a potato collapsing in on itself.
But it's also the implication that they know what you're about to say based on where you've rotated the wheel.
You can just change their expressions by doing it. What an amazing idea for a minigame.
Well, can you imagine overthinking a system that hard?
Yeah.
Maybe it's like when you go to, like, maybe tickle a dog and the dog knows what you're going to do and it cheers up, or it, like, freaks out and you're just like, oh, no, switch to something else. Patting. Okay, you're reacting well. Brilliant. So they're basically dogs, these people.
That's how you get a dog to sell you things cheaply and give you half of its possessions.
Yeah. They'll all be balls, but fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how we ended up here from the failings of Rainbow Six Siege, but I think it's...
I might be to blame. Every single time I was on Daft Souls podcast, tangents all over the place. Like, more tangents than circle geometry.
That's... That's a hell of a maths dad joke.
A maths bant.
Bant received. We're putting it in the bant locker.
Oh no.
Putting the bant locker deep in the sea.
Oh, I hate being in the bant locker. This is rubbish. Are there any more questions?
No, that's all the questions we've got time for.
Oh, thank God.
Because we've been here for about 3 hours.
Yeah.
If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can email us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can leave a question on the forum at crateandcrowbar.com/forum. You can tweet us at Crate and Crowbar. You can discuss the episode on Discord, on our Discord channel, a link which you'll find in either the show notes for this episode, which are on the website, or in the sidebar of the website, down at the bottom somewhere. You can also tweet us as individuals. I am at C Thurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Pip is...
Philippa War, at Philippa War, rather, which is PHILIPPAWARR. I'm trying really hard not to count on my fingers.
No, you were doing like a clenching motion.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I was stroking an imaginary mango to try and... I'm done with mangoes. Tom, who are you on Twitter?
At PCG Ludo, which is LUDO. Yes.
Nice.
Yes,
Good.
nice.
Yes.
Yes, nice, everybody.
Well pod listened, all of you. Good. Is that how we end?
No.
No.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Oh, shit.